Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. I have transmigrated. The original host of this body is dead. She killed herself by smashing her head against a wall. There was a bloody hole in her head, and blood was gushing out like a fountain. At that moment, I was almost killed by the pain. Looking down, I saw I was naked, my body covered in bruises. Looking up, I saw a filthy, unkempt man. Even without inheriting the original host's memories, I instantly understood what had happened to her. The man was still grinning lecherously, saying, "A young lady from a noble house is indeed different. Her skin is so fair and smooth, even her moans are soft and delicate. Haha, following me won't be a loss for you. From now on, you will be my bandit chief's wife." I looked at him in confusion. "Hey, big brother, don't you see the bleeding hole in my head? Where did you run off to when I smashed my head against the wall?" Just as I was thinking this, my gaze fell on a corner of the cave. There, a sharp, inconspicuous rock jutted out. I understood. The original host, after being violated, had fallen into despair. While the disheveled man wasn't paying attention, she had thrown herself at that rock and died quietly. I sighed. "Oh, little sister, living a life worse than death is still better than being dead. Why did you have to leave like this? Was it worth it? You should have at least taken a few of them with you." I raised my hand to cover the bloody hole on my head, intending to find something to bandage it, when I suddenly felt the wound rapidly closing beneath my palm. Very good. Have I become Spider-Man, or is this the standard perk for transmigrators? Regardless, after the hole in my head closed, the feeling of imminent death finally disappeared. I let out a soft sigh of relief. Then, before the astonished eyes of the man, I pretended to be shy, rushed forward, and hugged his neck tightly, whispering, "Husband. Since you have had my body, from now on, I am your woman." The man wrapped his arm around my waist, his rough hand greedily caressing my smooth skin, and said, "It seems you know your place. Indeed, a young lady from a noble house is much more sensible." I maintained a seductive smile, my fingertips lightly tracing circles on his chest. "Husband, you must be hungry, right? How about I go prepare some food for you? After you've eaten your fill, we can, again." The man's eyes showed a mix of confusion, surprise, and suspicion. You're really willing." I pretended to turn away shyly. "My husband is so valiant. How could I not like you?" The man was stunned, but soon he burst out laughing, took off his outer coat and draped it over me. "Fine. Go make the meal. Let me see what skills you have." On the way to the kitchen, I searched through the original host's memories and finally gathered some fragments of information. This was a bandit's lair. The original host was the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's residence, a true high-born lady. Unfortunately, she was captured by these bandits and lost her innocence here. The original host's name was Elena Ning, the same as mine. The bandits had appeared suddenly while she was on her way to pray at the Dian temple. Their appearance was extremely strange, as if they knew in advance she would be on that road, just waiting for her to fall into their trap. Perhaps there was someone pulling the strings from behind. Maybe because the original host had just died, the information I could access was limited, but it was enough. I ignored the scrutinizing gazes of the people around me and walked calmly into the kitchen. The bandits all knew I had been taken by their bandit chief. Looking at the disheveled clothes on me, they certainly understood I had been stripped clean by him for inspection. There was no problem, so they let me into the kitchen to cook without any fuss. They even told me to make a large portion, enough for everyone else. "We can't taste the noble lady herself, but at least we can try her cooking." The men around laughed with lewd expressions. I pretended to shrink back, nodding obediently. After I entered the kitchen, it wasn't long before smoke rose, and the aroma of food spread throughout the lair. I cooked them a spicy braised chicken. The era I had transmigrated to seemed to be a fictional world. It was impossible to determine the dynasty from their clothes, but the usual ingredients and spices were all available. Even in a bandit-infested place like this, I could still make spicy braised chicken. Can you believe it? They even had chili peppers. Chilies were introduced to China during the Ming dynasty, but these people were clearly not from the Ming era, yet they spoke Chinese. It was very likely a fictional world. This detail wasn't important. In short, I finished the spicy braised chicken. I noticed a major loophole. The ingredients and spices were so abundant, yet their cooking techniques were appallingly bad. Seeing the bandits' astonished expressions when they saw the chicken, and the way they devoured it like hungry pigs, I could tell these people normally never ate well. How strange. Who, and for what purpose, would create such a contradictory world? I was truly curious. After they finished eating, I brought out wine from the kitchen, poured a full bowl myself, and walked over to sit squarely on the bandit chief's lap. Husband, let me toast you. The bandit chief's face was shiny with grease from eating. He snatched the bowl from my hand, drained it in one gulp, then slung me over his shoulder and headed straight for his bedroom. The last time, he had violated me in a filthy cave. That was intentional. Now that I was willingly submitting, he took me to a cleaner bedroom to violate me. He considered this a favor. I grabbed his collar and urged him on. Husband, hurry up. I can't wait. He slapped my buttocks hard, his steps growing larger. The bandits in the main hall heard my urging and burst into laughter. Haha, as expected of the Prime Minister's daughter. Once she's been slept with, she's lewder than a prostitute from a brothel. The bandit chief carried me to his room and threw me onto the bed, then eagerly started to undress. I smiled and watched him. A moment later, he clutched his stomach, let out a retch, and vomited all over the floor. A wave of intense dizziness made him unable to stand, and he collapsed into the very mess he had just expelled. I sat on the bed, counting my fingers, quietly waiting. He writhed beside me, groaning weakly, trying to reach out and grab me. I turned my head away, not looking. He couldn't reach me anyway. Before long, there was no more movement from the bedside. The bandit chief had passed out. I slid off the bed, bent down, and pulled a dagger from his waist. It was called a dagger, but it was crudely shaped and nearly as long as my forearm. This was a murder weapon. I tested the sharpness of the blade with my fingertip. After confirming it was sharp enough, I raised it high and plunged it straight into the bandit chief's chest. He didn't even have time to make a sound before he died. I pulled out the dagger. Fresh blood spurted onto my face and hair. The blood pressure was so strong it even sprayed onto the wall, creating a crimson mural, as beautiful as red plums in the snow. The switch between hunter and prey is just that marvelous. I flicked the dagger, wiped my face, and pushed open the door. Outside, bodies were scattered everywhere. Seeing me, covered in blood and holding a dagger, some groaned in pain and tried to crawl away, others cursed at me relentlessly. I paid them no mind. One stab, one life. I was like a life-harvesting machine. Only a few were still groaning, most were already unconscious. The place was filled with vomit and excrement. I killed them with ease. Stepping into the main hall, I glanced at the spicy braised chicken on the table. It was almost completely gone, with only a few small pieces of potato left in the dish. They must have been too full to finish them. I picked up a cold piece of potato and examined it. Solanine. The toxin is mainly concentrated in potato sprouts. It's extremely poisonous. Just 0.2 to 0.4 grams is enough to be fatal. A familiar stream of data flashed through my mind. I casually tossed the potato piece away, a contemptuous smile on my lips. These idiots had a kitchen full of potatoes. In that damp, warm kitchen, there was a large sack of potatoes, all of which had sprouted. Killing them was just too easy. The amount of solanine in the potato sprouts might not have been enough to kill all of them, but it was enough to make them nauseous, dizzy, vomit, and even pass out, completely losing their ability to fight. The potatoes went first. I followed comfortably behind to reap the harvest. The plan was perfect. I did a full sweep of the lair, confirming that no one was left alive. Everyone was dead. Only then did I return to the storage room, grab some firewood, and heat up water. I took my time, scrubbing off all the dirt and blood from my body, then changed into a clean set of clothes. I had found these clothes among the bandits' stolen loot. I had to say, bathing alone in a bandit lair, a place filled with corpses and eerily silent, was a novel experience. There was an indescribable sense of security. After bathing, I adjusted my clothes and stepped over the corpses littering the ground, searching each room. I finally found the bandit chief's study. Pulling open the drawers, I rummaged through all the letters and account books inside, reading each one carefully. And I discovered something very interesting. There were many letters exchanged between the bandits and a man named Ethan Gu. It seemed Ethan was the one pulling the strings, directing all their actions. Ethan. According to the original host's memories, this was her childhood sweetheart. A bamboo horse, childhood friend. He grew up to foster a den of bandits and even intentionally arranged for them to capture and defile her. How very interesting. This childhood sweetheart. The original host was truly unlucky to have met a childhood friend like him. But something was wrong. According to the original host's memories, Ethan was merely the son of a minor 5th-rank censor, just the son of a low-level official. How could he possibly afford to support a bandit lair of this size? He definitely had a backer. Though I didn't know who it was yet, I searched the entire study, even knocking on all the walls to check for hidden compartments or secret rooms. After confirming I hadn't missed anything, I carefully collected all the evidence proving Ethan's collusion with the bandits and took it with me. If used skillfully, this evidence would be enough to ruin Ethan, leaving him with no place to be buried. I slowly walked out of the bandit lair. Under the bright moonlight, I glanced back one last time at this dark, filthy den. Turning away, I smiled, leaving all the filth and grime behind me. Next, it was time to return and take revenge. The Prime Minister's residence was already in chaos. The news that the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's residence had unfortunately encountered bandits on her way to prey and been abducted spread rapidly through the capital. The person behind the scenes wished the entire world could know this news in an instant. But how could they have expected me to escape the bandit lair so quickly? Therefore, when I, surrounded by maids and matrons like stars around the moon, stepped into the main hall, everyone was petrified. Elena. Why are you here? My stepmother's eyes widened. The handkerchief she was using to hide the smile at the corner of her mouth dropped to the floor in her shock. My father, along with my brothers and sisters, also stared at me wide-eyed. I deliberately put on a dazed expression and asked softly, "What is everyone doing here? Why did I just hear someone say I was captured by bandits?" Everyone looked at each other, and then their gazes collectively shifted to my stepmother, because she was the one who had brought this news back. My stepmother's whole body trembled, and then she suddenly burst into tears, pretending to be heartbroken as she rushed towards me. "My Elena, how did you escape? Didn't they say they were going to make you the bandit chief's wife? They even tore your clothes. You, Stepmother said this while scanning me from top to bottom, but there was no sign on my face that I had been violated. This made her freeze on the spot. I gently pushed her hand away, pushing her back a few steps so she wasn't blocking my view. "What are these words, stepmother? Have you gone mad? Your daughter went to the Dawn Temple to pray, ate a vegetarian meal, and returned. Why would stepmother take advantage of my absence to spread rumors that I was defiled by bandits?" My stepmother stared at me blankly, still trying to push me into a corner. "Elena, what are you talking about? I personally saw you being taken by those bandits. Stepmother, watch your words," I suddenly shouted, glaring at her. "Your daughter left in peace and returned in peace, without any mishap. Why must you insist on defiling me? Stepmother, even if you are possessed, you shouldn't speak nonsense and tarnish the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence." By now, everyone understood what was happening. Stepmother's eagerness to condemn me to death had completely exposed her malicious intentions. Father glared largely at her and ordered coldly, "Someone, take her away. She will kneel in the ancestral hall for 2 days. Have her think carefully about what should and shouldn't be said. As the official main wife, if you don't know how to protect the honor of this residence, then don't be it." Father's words were extremely severe. Stepmother, frightened, swallowed all the slanderous accusations she was about to make. She understood Father's personality. At this point, if she couldn't produce evidence that I was defiled, and given how quickly I had returned, there was no way to convict me. In this situation, with no proof, if she stubbornly continued to accuse me, the first person to punish her would be Father. In the end, she unwillingly let the matrons lead her away till obediently in the ancestral hall. After stepmother was led away, the main hall became silent as a tomb. This drama had started unexpectedly and ended just as confusingly. Many people still didn't understand what had just happened. I bowed to my father, my face showing a worried expression. "Father, on my way back, I heard rumors outside that I was captured by bandits. Why would such a baseless rumor spread so quickly? So fast that people outside knew before anyone in the residence. Who exactly wants to tarnish Father's reputation? Father must investigate this thoroughly." Father remained silent, his eyes dark, staring at me for a long moment before suddenly saying, "You follow me." With that, he turned and walked towards the study. I smiled gently at my brothers and sisters in the hall, then elegantly followed after him. For now, I had won this round. In the study, Father sat behind his desk, looking at me with cold eyes. I calmly met his gaze. I understood that the little show just now might have fooled others, but it could never fool my father, an old fox of the court. He knew this was likely orchestrated by stepmother, but he didn't know how I had escaped the bandits and managed to attack her so spectacularly. He needed the truth. "Did you truly preserve your honor?" Father asked in a low voice. I shook my head. "No." "Then how did you escape?" "Father, Did you think that after mother passed away, my maternal family truly cut off all contact with me? I smiled faintly and continued, Lady Chen wanted to ruin my reputation, to kill me. Fortunately, I was secretly protected by my maternal grandfather's people. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would not have been able to return to see father again. Hearing me, father immediately thought of my maternal family's power. A look of understanding crossed his face. So, it was your maternal family, did they? I smiled confidently. Of course. Father, rest assured, every single bandit, not one was left. As I spoke, I made a throat-cutting gesture. Only then did father let out a sigh of relief. I continued, your daughter can guarantee that no news will ever leak from the bandits aside. But Lady Chen, in her attempt to kill me, did not hesitate to tarnish the Prime Minister's residence's reputation. That, I cannot control. Ignoring father's darkening expression, I smiled and cupped my hands in a salute. Your daughter has done her best. As for how to deal with that venomous snake, how to quell the rumors, and save the residence's reputation, I'm afraid we must rely on father. The drama I staged this time was a complete success. That evening, I heard a matron report that father had gone to the ancestral hall and thoroughly scolded stepmother, Lady Chen. He even slapped her twice, so hard that her hair was in disarray, her hairpins askew, and her cheeks swollen red, completely stripping her of the dignity of a main wife. Father threatened to divorce her, forcing Lady Chen to confess the route through which the rumors had spread. Afterward, father immediately sent people to deal with the gossip mongers. He also sent men to lurk in crowded places. If they heard any rumors detrimental to me, they were to immediately seize the person, give them a beating, and hand them over to the authorities for punishment. Not only that, father also ordered me to frequently at gatherings of noble ladies, to appear before everyone and prove that nothing untoward had happened to me. I, of course, happily complied. Thanks to these measures, the rumors about me in the capital quickly subsided, and the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence was considered secured. As for stepmother, Matilda Chen, she had to bear father's thunderous wrath for this incident. After kneeling in the ancestral hall for several days, even after she returned, father couldn't be bothered to look at her. For nearly a month, he spent all his nights at concubine Mai's quarters. This was a slap in the face to Matilda, and also father's way of killing the chicken to scare the monkey, warning others in the residence. If anyone dared to harm the residence's reputation, their consequences would be far worse than Matilda's. After this incident, my status in the residence rose accordingly. Father believed my lie, thinking I could still influence my maternal family's decisions, so he began to favor and protect me more. The servants in the residence, who were used to reading their master's expressions, saw father's change in attitude and became much more fawning and respectful towards me. Following father's orders, I frequently went out, sometimes to attend a flower banquet for one young lady, other times to a poetry competition for another. This made everyone see even more clearly how much father valued me, further enhancing my status and noble position. In an instant I was like a radiant flower in spring, my reputation soaring, becoming the center of everyone's attention. This was something the original host had never experienced since her mother's death. What I obtained so easily was the goal the original host couldn't achieve even after 10 years of striving. The original host, after all, was just a 16-year-old girl confined to the inner chambers. She wasn't a natural-born genius. In a situation with an indifferent father and an abusive stepmother, she couldn't grasp what vision was, what struggle was, much less understand political maneuvering. She was trapped within a narrow framework, where even her smiles had to be perfectly measured. You cannot expect a child, bound by dogma and subjected to cold violence since youth, to break free from conventions and take control of her own life. Moreover, she was surrounded by a pack of wolves and tigers, each one a giant she could not possibly fight. The rites and filial piety pressed down on her so heavily she couldn't even lift her head. Her misfortune was sealed long ago. I arrived too late. I couldn't save her. The only thing I can do for her is revenge. In the Prime Minister's residence, I only have 3 things to do: fight for power, and still, fight for power. From my father, to gain power. Therefore, I always stayed by father's side, because father is the center of power in this residence. Father wanted me to attend many gatherings of noble ladies to uphold the residence's reputation. I immediately used this opportunity to ask father for money, to buy the most expensive patterned brocade silk for clothes, and to buy the most fashionable jewelry sets to show off our prestige. The first time I went to father, he habitually said, For inner chamber matters like this, just go find your mother to arrange it. After speaking, he waited a long time but didn't see me bow and leave. He looked up and saw me still standing there, smiling faintly at him, not saying a word. My silence and refusal to leave finally made father remember what stepmother had recently done. Father is the type of person who is incredibly forgetful as long as his own interests aren't affected. That's why he could unconsciously blurt out telling me to go find that wicked woman to handle things. Ahem. He coughed lightly, trying to hide his guilt and embarrassment. How much silver do you need? Take my token and go to the finance office to withdraw it. I looked at the token he placed on the table, but I didn't rush to take it. Instead, I asked loudly, Father, the gatherings I am about to attend are all with the top noble ladies of the capital. Do you know what that means? What do you mean? Father didn't understand. For the capital's noble ladies, a single set of jewelry is worth 1,000 gold taels, I said leisurely. As for clothing, not only must the best fabric be used, but preparing a complete outfit costs hundreds of silver taels. Most importantly, a noble lady's attire can only be worn once. Ignoring father's increasingly dark expression, I continued calmly. Every time I attend a banquet, I must wear a different outfit. Besides the outfit I'm wearing, I must prepare 2 more sets of the same caliber, in case one gets wet with wine or water. If I don't have a change of clothes, I will become a laughingstock. I looked directly at father, smiled slightly, and bowed. Previously, I never participated in these noble gatherings. Because my monthly allowance was only 2 taels. Forget buying clothes or jewelry, I couldn't even afford to treat a guest to a meal. Lady Chen also never prepared any expensive clothes or jewelry for me, so father was unaware of these things. But now, I need to attend these gatherings. For the sake of the Prime Minister's residence's reputation, this silver must be spent, even if it hurts. So, I want to ask father, this token, exactly how much silver can I withdraw from the finance office? Father had originally intended to just give me 100 taels to gloss things over. When Matilda learned that I had received father's token, and could withdraw an unlimited amount of silver from the finance office, she naturally couldn't sit still. She ran to father's study to argue. But what reasoning did she have? The more they argued, the angrier they got, and it eventually escalated into a huge fight. Matilda had no ground to stand on. The more of a scene she made, the more father remembered that the reason I'd to attend these gatherings was to cleanse the residence's reputation. And the reason it needed cleansing was because Matilda had selfishly stirred up trouble and falsely accused me. In other words, all the silver father had to spend was because of Matilda's lack of virtue. Yet, not only did Matilda not reflect on her actions, she dared to quarrel with him. Father became even more furious, and so, Matilda received 2 resounding slaps and a special gift package kneeling in the ancestral hall for 3 days. When the matron reported this to me, I laughed so hard I rolled around on my bed. My personal maid Cixi was a bit confused and asked, "My lady, why would madam dare to court disaster like this? Did she forget what she just did?" I used a long golden spoon to slowly stir the sweet soup in my bowl and leisurely explained. Cixi. When people stay in a position of advantage for too long, they often develop a fixed mindset that is hard to change. Matilda has controlled the inner court of this residence for 10 years, crushing the original host, this eldest daughter, under her heel for just as long. She has grown accustomed to her high and mighty status. So how could she possibly be willing to endure this? Even if reason told her this wasn't the right time to argue with her husband, her emotions overrode her reason. She would rather fight with father than see me get my way and live the life of a noble lady. Humans are inherently creatures governed by emotions. Even those who claim to be rational are still, at their core, led by their feelings. I understood this from the criminal cases I knew before I transmigrated. Even a ruthless killer who wouldn't blink an eye could choose to surrender for fear of frightening his mother, even with a gun in the drawer right next to him. Logic said that if he killed the police and fled, there was still a sliver of hope for survival. But emotion made him willing to give up that slim hope. Humans are creatures of emotion. Even sociopaths can distinguish between those who are close and those who are distant. Therefore, it was entirely within my expectations that Matilda would act so foolishly. The proudest person is the one who finds it most unbearable to see the ant they once stepped on suddenly become their equal, someone who needs to be respected. Just the thought of me becoming her equal was enough to make her agitated. So, she would definitely go and pick a fight with father. I sighed softly and finished the sweet soup. The so-called art of political maneuvering is just about interests and human nature. That's all there is to it. I seem to have been born knowing these schemes. So, in this house, I will definitely thrive, like a fish in water. Stepmother Matilda's repeated failures in her attempts to harm me led to a decline in her status in the residence. This decline was, of course, relative. She was still the main wife, holding the managerial power of the inner court. Her words still carried weight. However, she could no longer control me. Because of the bandit incident, I had successfully broken free from her supervision. My monthly allowance was no longer managed by her. My clothes and jewelry were no longer decided by her. All my matters of living and travel were arranged by me directly, reporting only to father. I had become a master with real authority in the residence. So, by comparison, her status had naturally fallen. Indeed, after suffering several heavy blows, Matilda grew desperate, and right at this moment, Ethan appeared, summoned by her. When the young man, as refined as a cool breeze, with a handsome and elegant face, stood before me, a wave of unpleasant emotions surged within me. I placed a hand on my chest, silently telling myself, "Don't be sad. He's not worth it." But the feeling wouldn't subside. In fact, it grew stronger. I understood. She was unwilling. I also understood that she once had bright, innocent childhood memories with this young man. Ethan was different to Alina. He was a rare beacon of light in her dark life. He once symbolized a beautiful future and a source of hope. But now, knowing that the beautiful memories were fake, the future was fake, and the hope was fake, a young man who seemed so refined had rotted into a black maggot. How could she not be heartbroken? I understood her. But now was not the time for grief. Facing Ethan, I had to focus all my mental energy. I suppressed the original host's emotions and looked straight into Ethan's profound gaze. I was unmoved. Because, from the original host's memories, I knew the capabilities of this man. He could look at a pig with a gaze full of deep affection. Truly a master actor. "Elena, is your chest hurting?" He noticed my hand on my chest and asked with concern. I didn't answer his question, only looked at him, my eyes gradually filling with resentment. "Ethan, do you even know what my life has been like lately?" He was taken aback by my question, instinctively replying, "What's happened to you lately?" He didn't think I would be suffering in the Prime Minister's residence. On the contrary, the information he received was that I was doing very well, that even Matilda had to avoid my sharp edge. So he was genuinely confused. I looked at him with desolate eyes and gently pushed him away. "You don't care about me at all. It's been so long, and you haven't even sent a single message. If I were tortured to death by Matilda one day, you wouldn't even know." Ethan was confused, but he knew this was the time to follow my lead. "Elena, what on earth happened? Just tell me." I forced myself to recall the grievances of the past, and tears fell like pure blossoms in the rain. I can't get married anymore. I'm no longer pure. It's all Matilda's fault. She ruined me. She deserves to die." Hearing this, Ethan's entire body stiffened. He quickly grabbed my hand, anxiously demanding, "Elena, what did you say? You're no longer pure." I cried so hard my whole body trembled, and I nodded slightly. Ethan was both thrilled and alarmed. The corners of his mouth twitched upwards, but when I looked up at him, he immediately suppressed his smile. "But wasn't the bandit incident already clarified as a rumor?" "No, it wasn't, Ethan. I truly can't go on living. Father covered it up for the sake of the residence's reputation. But I am ultimately no longer a pure maiden. If I get married in the future, on the wedding night, what if my husband discovers I'm not a virgin? What should I do?" Recently, the third prince and father have been very close. Father seems to intend to marry me to the third prince. But I burst into tears again, covering my face and stomping my foot. At that time, wouldn't that be deceiving the emperor? What am I supposed to do? Ethan understood everything. He was both shocked and overjoyed. He quickly grasped my hands. "Elena, listen to me. Why don't you marry me?" I feigned surprise, tears still glistening in my eyes, as if I had never expected him to say such a thing. Ethan wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, his gaze full of sincerity. "Elena, ever since we were children, I've dreamed of marrying you. You are the most wonderful woman in my heart. If Prime Minister Ning agrees to marry you to me, I will be eternally grateful. In this life, I will absolutely never fail you." I pretended to be so happy that I laughed through my tears. "That's wonderful, Ethan. You don't despise me. I'm so happy. I knew you were true to me. When will you come to propose?" "I will go back and report to my parents immediately and have them arrange it. Helena, don't worry. Just wait for me." I'll wait for you." I tugged at the corner of his sleeve, instructing him, Ethan, about my condition. Only father and you know. You must not tell your parents. If they find out their future daughter-in-law is no longer. I won't want to live anymore. Elena, rest assured. I promise I won't say a word. Ethan, you're so good to me. With tears in my eyes, I waved him goodbye. The moment I turned around, I casually wiped away the tears, my face returning to its usual indifference. The show is about to begin. Ethan had long been colluding with Matilda. My encounter with the bandits was intentionally arranged by him. But clearly, according to their plan, what they wanted wasn't my life, but to destroy my purity. This is very interesting. In other words, to them, a living me was more valuable than a dead me. And from Ethan's reaction, I understood another thing. To them, a me with a ruined reputation was even more valuable than a me with a perfect one. From these two known facts, combined with the role of a boudoir, confined woman in ancient times, I could deduce Ethan's intentions. He, the son of a censor, was just a poor commoner who had yet to pass the imperial examinations. He was completely unworthy of me, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's residence. If not for having studied together at a great scholars' academy in our youth, when I was in the countryside, the son of a mere fifth-rank official like him would never even have the right to stand before me. The class barrier exists in every era. But Ethan wanted to overcome that barrier. So, he wanted to marry me. Not for love, but simply to turn me into a stepping stone, to climb on me to reach for higher fruit. But my father is the Prime Minister. How could the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister be married to the son of a fifth-rank official? Furthermore, to view me, a Prime Minister's daughter, as a stepping stone was wildly arrogant. He would never dare reveal such ambitions. He also understood clearly that my marriage was not something he could decide. So he sought out Matilda. He saw her hatred for me. He knew that as long as he could push me into an abyss from which I could never recover, Matilda would be willing to pay any price. He and Matilda, one seeking revenge, the other seeking to exploit, formed a perfect partnership. They joined forces to push the original host to a dead end. Then, Ethan would propose to marry her, making it easy to succeed. In ancient times, a noblewoman losing her purity wasn't necessarily forced to die, but that was only if she had parents and a family willing to protect her. But Elena did not. So, if Elena didn't want to die, she could only marry him. His calculations were crystal clear, and what I needed was precisely this clarity in his calculations so I could guide the next act. As expected, a few days later, Ethan and his father, Censor Simon Gu, personally came to my residence to propose marriage. The one who received Simon Gu was not Elda, but my father. After a month of massive expenditures, for dresses, jewelry, banquets, and investments in the noble ladies' poetry societies, my father had already invested too much of a sunk cost in me. Although he had never genuinely cared for me, he had undeniably spent a significant amount of silver on me. Therefore, he didn't dare entrust my marriage to Matilda. He was afraid Matilda would make all the silver he spent go down the drain. He had to personally vet every suitor, weigh the options carefully, and choose the one who could bring him the maximum benefit, to ensure he could sell me at the highest possible price. So when Censor Simon Gu came to propose, my father frowned just hearing his name. A mere fifth-rank official. The match was far too low. However, my father was a seasoned court official, skilled in navigating social situations, not some shallow, profit-driven fool. Although he had already drawn a large X in his mind, he still received Censor Gu politely. After hearing Simon Gu's presentation, my father offered a very dignified refusal, stating that he couldn't bear to part with his daughter and wished to keep her by his side for a few more years. Normally, both sides would just exchange a few pleasantries about state affairs, and the matter would be considered closed. Everyone in the court is tactful and understands subtlety. But who would have thought that after my father's gentle refusal, Censor Gu's expression changed? He didn't give up and continued to persuade. My father refused again. Censor Gu gripped the armrest of his chair, persistently lecturing on his son's virtues. My father refused 3 times, then waved his hand, indicating he didn't want to discuss it further, only saying, "Drink your tea. Drink your tea. Let's set this matter aside." Finally, Censor Gu looked around, saw no one else, and leaned close to my father, whispering something. What he specifically said, the servant responsible for gathering information in the front hall didn't hear clearly, but everyone knows what happened next. My father's face turned purple with rage. He picked up his hot teacup and threw it directly in Censor Gu's face. "You scoundrel! How dare you speak such insolence? You're insulting the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence. You deserve death. You deserve death. Censor Gu, scalded by the hot tea, screamed in pain. He clutched his burning red face, but his mouth kept shouting, "Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know. If the Prime Minister agrees to this, I guarantee no one will spread it." But before he could finish, my father covered his mouth, gave him a sound beating, and had him dragged out of the residence. After throwing Censor Gu out, father angrily instructed the gatekeeper. From now on, anyone from the Gu family, no matter who, is forbidden from stepping foot in this residence. After giving the order, he turned and went to the study. He was writing a memorial, preparing to impeach Simon Gu before the emperor at court tomorrow. I listened to the matron's report, a small smile playing on my lips. My hand didn't stop, grinding the fresh red petals in the mortar with a jade pestle. Cici stood beside me, adding camellia oil. Huanzi was sprawled on the table, watching me grind the flowers, mesmerized. "My lady, your hands are so beautiful." I freed one hand and gently tapped Huanzi between her eyebrows. "You only know how to look at pretty things." Cici pursed her lips and smiled. "Huanzi has been like that since she was little. She'll cling to anyone who's beautiful. This child has been a face, Kong since birth." The term face, Kong, Yan, Kong was one I taught them. Since learning it, they've been using it to tease each other. I looked at my own hands. They were beautiful. The fingers were fair and slender, like green onion stalks, elegant and delicate. Any movement they made was beautiful. Just by looking at these hands, one could glimpse the original host's beauty. It's said the original host's appearance wasn't even 1/3 as beautiful as her biological mother's. One can only imagine that the original host's mother must have been a rare, world-toppling beauty. Unfortunately, in this man-eat-man world, a woman who is too weak, no matter how beautiful, will find it hard to live long. The reason Matilda was so jealous of the original host was likely because of the original host's mother. The original host's very existence constantly reminded Matilda that her husband once had a main wife of devastating beauty. That's why Matilda frantically tortured the original host, as if making her live in misery could somehow make her win against the white moonlight in her husband's heart. It's truly ridiculous. While the maids were teasing each other, I just listened quietly, my hands absently crushing the flower petals, but my mind had already drifted 1,000 miles away. "My lady, that should be enough. Let me help you sift the powder." Huanzi's clear voice rang in my ear, pulling me back to reality. I was startled and instinctively handed her the mortar. Huanzi didn't notice anything amiss, took the mortar, poured out the flower powder, and carefully sifted it. See, she noticed I seemed distracted and asked, "My lady, are you all right? Are you worried about Censor Gu's marriage proposal?" I shook my head and smiled slightly. "Yes and no. My lady, I don't understand. My father has already started writing a memorial to impeach Simon Gu. But tomorrow afternoon, he will definitely have his eyes opened. Does he think that beating someone, throwing them out, and then submitting a memorial is the end of the matter? Oh, my knave father. Things have only just begun. The real show is still to come. It won't be long before father understands just how disgusting the Gu family is." As expected, the early court session the next afternoon was a series of dramatic confrontations. It almost turned into an all-out brawl. My father intended to present his memorial to impeach Simon Gu, but unexpectedly, Simon Gu was one step ahead, pulling out his own memorial to impeach my father. My father was stunned. He had been an official for many years and had seen all sorts, but he had never met anyone so shameless. Simon Gu, right in the middle of the hall, in front of all the civil and military officials, loudly declared that the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter, Elena, had lost her virtue, that she had been kidnapped by bandits and was no longer pure. He even said that who knows whose bastard child she is carrying. Yet my father dared to think of marrying this damaged good to the third prince. This was a clear act of deceiving the emperor. My father was so furious he stomped his feet. "My daughter has always been virtuous and pure. Heaven and earth can bear witness. How, in the presence of His Majesty, can you despicable old man, spout such slander to destroy a person's reputation? Yesterday, you dared to speak insolence and I gave you a beating, yet you still haven't learned your lesson. Today you dare to spout nonsense here. I will fight you to the death." With that, my father rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward to fight. Simon Gu, who had just been beaten by my father yesterday, knew full well that my father wasn't just skilled in literature but also proficient in martial arts. Seeing my father charge at him like a tiger descending a mountain, Simon Gu immediately hid behind a military general, not daring to peek out. My father tried to hit him but was blocked by the general, which led to him chasing Simon Gu around in circles. And so, with the general as the center, my father and Simon Gu began an endless game of cat and mouse around the pillar. The solemnity of the imperial court was completely gone. The other ministers either stood by watching, or tried to mediate, or snickered secretly. Only the poor general was stuck in the middle. No one would actually step in to stop it. Everyone was too busy watching the show. Finally, the emperor himself had to speak up. To mediate. Only then did my father reluctantly give up on beating that scoundrel Gu to death. But immediately after, my father ran to the steps of the throne, knelt down, and kowtowed, crying out for justice. Your Majesty, please investigate. My beloved daughter, who I have cherished like a pearl since she was a child, who has never suffered even the slightest scratch. And now she is being slandered by this villain. A young woman, being defamed like this. Isn't this forcing her to die? Your Majesty. Your Majesty. You must seek justice for your humble servant. I have been wronged with no way to explain myself. It is truly unbearable. My father's performance was smooth, every word filled with emotion. The final line, wronged with no way to explain myself, was even drawn out, sending a chill down the spine of anyone who heard it. Twice, the emperor felt his head was about to explode. Looking at the prime minister, sobbing, snot and tears everywhere, kneeling on the ground and refusing to get up, the emperor was in a dilemma, not knowing whether to help him up or not. He could only glare angrily at Simon Gu, not to mention whether the girl was pure or not. Even if she had been violated by bandits, it was her family's private matter. What did it have to do with you, you shameless old fool? But the emperor couldn't say this out loud in court. Fortunately, the emperor hadn't just ascended the throne. He could see that there were many hidden twists to this matter, and he couldn't rush to a conclusion. Looking at the prime minister who was trembling, his shoulders shaking from crying, the emperor said in a deep voice, "A matter concerning a maiden's honor is no small thing, nor is it suitable for public discussion. Court is dismissed for today. We will discuss this later." After court was dismissed, father immediately returned to the residence and summoned me to the study. I walked into the study, calm and composed, adjusted my skirt, and bowed. Your daughter greets father. I wish father good health. Father waved his hand, telling me to dispense with the pleasantries. Elena, there is something I must ask you clearly, thoroughly. I smiled calmly. Father, please ask. Did you, or did you not, lose your virtue? Father's voice was cold, emphasizing the words lose your virtue. I maintained my calm and composed smile. No. Elena, if you truly did, you don't need to be afraid. Just tell father honestly. Father can still find a way to cover it up for you. Otherwise, when the palace sends a nanny to inspect you, if you are found to no longer be pure, our Ning family will be in grave danger. I nodded, indicating I understood. Father looked at me with a gaze full of both hope and anxiety. Elena, I'll ask you one more time. Yes. I nodded with grace and composure. Father finally let out a long sigh of relief. Good, that's good. In that case, when the palace nanny comes to inspect you, we have nothing to worry about. That's not the right way to think, father. I cut off his sigh of relief and said seriously, just based on a few slanders from Simon Gu, the legitimate daughter of the prime minister's residence, must suffer the humiliation of being inspected. Today, this person doubts my purity. Tomorrow, another person will doubt it. Must I be inspected every single time to prove my innocence? Father, if I easily agree to this inspection, then even if I am truly pure, my reputation will be impossible to maintain. Father's expression turned serious again. Elena, you are right. He suddenly stood up and paced back and forth in the study, the worry lines on his brow deepening. But if you don't undergo the inspection, Elena, how can you clear your name and restore your reputation? Father, clearing my own name is meaningless. Once I fall into the trap of self-vindication, it will be followed by endless demands for more proof. Not to mention, can we be sure the palace nanny won't be bribed, or won't intentionally twist the truth? Even if she proves I am pure, what if someone accuses father of bribing her? What if that nanny is later bribed by someone else to bear false witness and slander father? At that time, how will father vindicate himself? Hearing my series of questions, father increasingly felt that the path of self-vindication was indeed the wrong one to take. The moment you try to prove your own innocence, you are naturally seen as inferior. Because what you are doing is seeking the approval of others, placing yourself in a position of weakness, hoping others will judge you fairly. That is absolutely not a good choice. It was I who was not thinking clearly. Thank goodness you are so careful and meticulous, Elena. Then, in your, what is the proper way to handle this? I leaned close to Father's ear and whispered a few sentences. At first, Father's eyes went wide. Then, he clucked his tongue in admiration. Finally, he burst out laughing and clapped his hands in praise. Elena, you truly are a brilliant strategist. Only you could think of such an earth-shattering plan. The title of strategist is just a joke among friends. It's not to be taken seriously. Father, this method has wide-ranging implications. One wrong step, and we could incur the wrath of everyone. But since the Gu family wants to slander the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence, we can't just suffer alone. Exactly. Why should only our Ning family suffer? Falsely accusing the Prime Minister's daughter of losing her virtue is already a shocking affair. If that's the case, let's make it even bigger. Let's muddy the waters completely. Father threw his head back and laughed loudly, then immediately left the room. He wanted to submit a memorial to the court to request an audience with the emperor, to discuss this with him. CC, standing behind me, worriedly whispered, "My lady, will His Majesty agree to this plan?" I stood still, for a long time, watching Father's retreating back, and replied, "He will agree." From the scattered information in this story, I knew that the emperor in this book was secretly a tyrannical and unhinged man. On the surface, he appeared magnanimous and tolerant. This was evident in how he didn't require the common people to avoid his naming taboo, nor did he stop them writing and adapting him into all sorts of characters. Because of this, everyone said he was a good emperor. However, his true personality was completely unlike Allah, the gentle cade he showed the public. He was the son of the late empress, having lost his mother at a young age, and was not born to the current empress dowager. If not for the fact that the empress dowager had no children of her own and finally had to adopt him. A motherless child, unfavored by the late emperor, whose position as the legitimate prince was precarious. His title of crown prince would have been long lost. There was even a secret rumor circulating among the people that the late empress was murdered, and that the current emperor, as a child had witnessed his mother's tragic death. This story was too bizarre, so not many people believed it. Only I, a book transmigrator, knew that this rumor was the hidden truth. Having gone through such a childhood, even the most normal person would inevitably develop a twisted and dark personality, let alone him. After ascending the throne, the emperor had to face the constraints of all his civil and military officials. This made him appear gentle and patient on the outside, but his heart was filled with suppressed tyranny, which he finally unleashed in immoral acts. For example, he once suddenly declared he wanted to bring woman who had just given birth into the palace as a concubine. He ignored the vehement opposition of the entire court and the imperial harem. Despite the risk of confusing the imperial bloodline, he insisted on doing it. Another example was his relationship with his adoptive mother, the current Empress Dowager. In reality, they were not on good terms. He only showed her respect on the surface, while simultaneously splitting the power of the harem with another person, Consort Jiang, a consort of the late emperor who had been unfavored, now known as Dowager Consort Jiang. The Empress Dowager, to express her anger, announced she was leaving the palace to pray. But in reality, she stirred up public opinion, subtly implying the emperor was unfilial, hoping to force him to beg her to return. However, after 5 years, she still had to quietly come back and continue her rivalry with Dowager Consort Jiang, pretending nothing had ever happened. An emperor like this, sensitive, suspicious, rebellious, and unhinged, is truly hard to understand. How could he possibly maintain his reputation for tolerance and generosity among the people? The only thing I can guess is his intense desire to pursue and assert himself. Therefore, my proposal can both help him suppress all the civil officials and allow him to express his personality, leaving a deep mark on history. Even if it's not a good mark, it would certainly be an unprecedented act, one that no one before could do and no one after could easily replicate. I think he will agree. Even so, the nature of this emperor is truly contradictory and abnormal. This is clear from his act of bringing a new mother into the palace as a concubine. He didn't even care about something as serious as potentially confusing the imperial bloodline. It just showed his magnanimous facade is a lie. In reality, he is a rare madman, the likes of which hasn't been seen in 100 years. He will agree? I said calmly. The next day, as expected, Simon Gu brought up the old topic again, demanding that the Prime Minister's daughter, Elena, vindicate herself before the world. The emperor immediately acted as if it was no problem. saying, "Very well. Then we shall send an experienced palace nanny to conduct the inspection." However, another minister stepped forward to object. "This plan is flawed. The Prime Minister's residence is powerful. What if Prime Minister Ning has already bribed the nanny, or used some secret means to control her, forcing her to say what he wants? Wouldn't that be deceiving your majesty, a crime worthy of death?" The surrounding ministers all nodded in agreement. My father heard this baseless accusation. And if I hadn't discussed it with him and prepared him mentally, he would have exploded with rage. He hadn't even done anything, and he was already being accused of deceiving the emperor. These scoundrels, they kill without a knife, using only their tongues to fabricate crimes. How despicable, how hateful. My father gripped the jade tablet in his hand, silently chanting in his heart, "Do not argue right and wrong with a fool. Do not argue right and wrong with a fool." The emperor, having already discussed this with my father yesterday, was not at all flustered when he heard these questions. He pretended to hesitate and think for a moment, then suddenly smiled brightly. "If that's the case, then let's have all the unmarried young ladies from all your households come and be inspected together." Silence. A deathly silence. Everyone stared, dumbfounded. For a moment no one spoke. At first, the ministers thought they had misheard. Only when the emperor repeated his intention did their suspended hearts truly drop. They hadn't misheard. Had the emperor gone mad? While the ministers were still stunned, the emperor seized the opportunity to speak. First, the emperor stated that to demand a noble lady be inspected based solely on Simon Gu's one-sided testimony was against the rights. However, as Censor Gu had raised this doubt, the emperor could not simply ignore it. After consideration, the emperor decided that an inspection could be held, but it could not only be the prime minister's daughter. Simon Gu had made an accusation that damaged honor. The honor of another man's daughter. So he must also present his own unmarried daughter for inspection. As for the other ministers, those who agreed with Simon Gu and felt his actions were not wrong, they must do the same. Bring all the unmarried girls from their households for inspection. As soon as these words were spoken, the court was filled with wailing and despair. The ministers who had been watching the spectacle yesterday, laughing at another's misfortune, finally understood what it meant to share the same pain. My father, standing at the very front, stroked his beard, sighed, and slowly recited, "Today, my body returns to its old soil, tomorrow, your body will do the same." It was just like the saying, "Laugh at someone today, and tomorrow you will be laughed at." The nearby ministers who heard this shuddered. The ministers who had been named could not bear it. They immediately knelt and kowtowed, begging for forgiveness, hoping His Majesty would not implicate the innocent girls in their families. Some even began to attack Simon Gu, saying his conduct was improper, that he spent all day obsessing over the skirts of unmarried girls. How shameful! The emperor, satisfied, looked at more than half the court wailing, and smiled brightly. "Rest assured, we will arrange for some palace maids who have not yet reached marriageable age to participate in the inspection as well. During the inspection, all the young ladies must wear silk veils and are forbidden from communicating with each other. Otherwise, it will be considered cheating. Furthermore, we will arrange not just one, but multiple nannies to supervise and ensure no mistakes are made." The ministers all shouted in unison, "Your Majesty, please retract the edict." But the emperor was unmoved. Someone stubborn tried to argue, but as soon as he opened his mouth, his colleagues covered it, forced his head down to kowtow, and hissed, "Shut up. Do you want to make things even worse?" The emperor spoke calmly, his tone full of deep meaning. "We just want all of you to understand the meaning of leading by example. If you can impeach others without evidence, relying on just a few words to pin a monstrous crime on someone, then this is no longer justice, it is malice. In our court, we do not want to see officials who only know how to harm others and not how to do real work. This matter is settled. Court is dismissed." Hearing the emperor's words, the ministers were aghast, screaming internally, "You mad emperor! What right do you have to stand there and say such things? You've done so many chaotic things, you can't even remember them all. And now you use this as an excuse to suppress us." The ministers were so angry they gnashed their teeth, but the emperor was completely at ease. He rattled on like a string of firecrackers, ignoring the pathetic wails of the ministers behind him, and took light steps back to the inner palace. Such an interesting event, he had to discuss it carefully with the Empress, to draft a detailed and perfect inspection procedure so that no one could object later. He wanted those troublesome ministers to know, when it came to being a madman, he was the most serious one. Half a month later, the inspection that drove the court officials to despair officially began. This inspection was overseen by the Empress and 4 other virtuous consorts. The nannies dispatched for the inspection belonged to 5 different factions, mutually supervising each other, making bribery or falsification of results absolutely impossible. At the same time, the emperor also dispatched his personal contingent of court ladies, leading 5 teams of palace maids, to supervise and maintain order at the scene. The inspection location was set at the Palace of Gathered Elegance. Outside the palace, eunuchs stood with their backs to the walls, forming a human barrier to prevent any scoundrels from climbing the walls to peek inside. Inside the palace, palace maids stood guard under every wall, preventing anyone from sneaking in to watch. The young ladies arriving for the inspection had to register first, writing their own name and their parents' names, and then provide all 10 fingerprints for later verification. If there were cases of identical names, they would be clearly distinguished. Even identical twins would not be mistaken. The registration list was managed by the emperor's personal court ladies, and its contents were absolutely confidential, not to be revealed to anyone. Even the empress and the 4 consorts could not interfere. Each young lady had to wear a veil, a screened hat, and a uniform garment that covered almost her entire body. During the inspection, only the necessary part would be exposed. In fact, many noble ladies, upon seeing this outfit, completely sealed except for a single hole in the crotch, burst into tears of anger. They had been pampered and cherished like jade and pearls since childhood, never suffering such humiliation. They're treating us like livestock. This is shameless. What do they take us for? The noble ladies who hadn't yet entered the inspection stood in the courtyard of the Palace of Gathered Elegance, cuddled in small groups, crying pitifully. It's all that Simon Gu's fault. He couldn't mind his own business and just had to insist the Prime Minister's daughter wasn't pure. Now all of us have to suffer this. How ridiculous. The Prime Minister's daughter is always in her residence. She only goes out for gatherings of noble ladies, and that day. She returned to the residence on the same day. How could she have been captured by bandits, abducted in the day and released at night? Is there anything more ridiculous? They fabricated a story without even writing a draft. It's true. Besides, whether the Prime Minister's daughter is pure or not, what does it have to do with him? She's not marrying into the Gu family anyway. I heard his daughters have to be inspected too. Who are they? Where? Find them. I need to take my anger out on them. The courtyard erupted into chaos, nearly escalating into a collective scuffle. Fortunately, the emperor's stern-faced personal court ladies stepped forward with the supervisory teams to maintain order. Silence is forbidden in this important palace area. Although the noble ladies were dissatisfied, they dared not act recklessly. They obediently lined up as arranged by the court ladies. Anyone who dares to whisper will have their name recorded on a list and reported, letting all the civil and military officials see which family teaches their daughters such poor etiquette. Hearing this, the noble ladies all shuddered and quickly bowed their heads. No one dared to glance sideways or whisper another word. The court ladies, seeing the scene finally quiet, were finally satisfied. Registration is complete. The inspection will now begin. The first row enter. In the inner hall of the Palace of Gathered Elegance, a dozen nannies stood in a row, their hearts filled with anxiety. These nannies belonged to different factions, including the Empress and the 4 virtuous consorts. They all had their own masters and allegiances, but now they all shared a common worry and unease. This intense anxiety made them unconsciously grip the handkerchiefs in their hands. The reason was simple: they had just learned that their own nieces were included in the group of young ladies to be inspected. This was the emperor's decision, intended to ensure fairness and impartiality, forcing the nannies to be as diligent and strict as possible in their duties. Because this was a matter concerning a young woman's honor, it could not be done carelessly. Cold sweat soaked the handkerchiefs in their palms. They were truly panicking. Why? Because in truth, it was impossible to tell who was a virgin and who was not. That day, I had specifically emphasized to father that he must follow my plan. Stir up the situation, drag all the other officials into it, and most importantly, ensure that all the nieces of the nannies participating in the inspection were also on the list. Furthermore, this news was not to be leaked to the nannies beforehand. They were only to be informed on the day of the inspection. Although father didn't understand why I was so instant, he trusted my strategic ability and calculus, so he did as I said. The emperor, who loved a good spectacle, naturally agreed as well. Only I knew why this was so crucial. Because the virginity test itself is inherently inaccurate. There is nothing to inspect and no way to inspect it. Why? Because a woman's hymen comes in myriad shapes and sizes, there is no uniform standard. Moreover, the hymen naturally has openings. This is completely normal. If there were no openings, how would menstrual blood exit? Furthermore, the hymen is elastic. If the impact is not too great and the action not too rough, a woman's hymen might not be damaged or torn at all. It remains the same as it was before, completely unharmed. Some women are even born without a hymen. Finally, and most astonishingly, the hymen can self-repair. Because it is body tissue, its ability to heal is perfectly normal. As long as it is not completely torn to pieces, even if it is slightly damaged or bleeds, a woman's hymen can heal itself. Therefore, as long as a woman does not engage in frequent sexual activity, or is not inspected immediately after intercourse, or is not inspected while suffering from a brutal, unhealed injury, it is fundamentally impossible to determine who is a virgin and who is not. When I first transmigrated here, the original host was already dead. After I stabilized myself in the Prime Minister's residence, I inspected my own body. How should I put it? Perfect. Not a trace of damage. If the original host hadn't been so young, and if the act hadn't been so brutal, there might not even have been any blood. Therefore, after returning to the Prime Minister's residence, I worked hard to heal my wounds. The only evidence proving I had been assaulted was the bruises and handprints on my body. But with persistent application of medicine and careful nursing during that first month, all those marks completely disappeared. If I had been inspected on the first day I returned to the residence, there might have been some traces left to check. But now, no matter who inspects me, I am a pure, untouched virgin. These nannies in the palace who perform the inspections are all battle-hardened. However, their battle experience relies mainly on the principles of observation, listening, questioning, and pulse-taking. Among these, questioning is the most critical standard for judgment. In other words, interrogation. These nannies often use clever, leading questions to guide the subject, to reveal her own flaws. But these very tricks easily lead to misjudgments, because when under stress, even an innocent person will appear unnatural. Most importantly, these nannies often go with the flow when making a judgment. If everyone at the scene believes the subject has lost her virtue, it's highly likely the nannies will concur that she is no longer pure. Therefore, the so-called virginity test is, in reality, full of deception and hidden agendas. This is precisely why these nannies are sweating bullets. First, their usual method, interrogation, is now useless. The scene strictly forbids dialogue to prevent revealing identities and influencing fairness. Second, they can't judge based on physical characteristics either, because all the young ladies are wearing identical uniforms, covering everything except the necessary parts. Third, even if they wanted to go with the flow, they can't even identify who Elena is, so how can they follow the prevailing wind? And finally, their own relatives are in this group. Even if they wanted to arbitrarily pick someone out to prove their professionalism, as long as their own family members are mixed in, how would they dare? What if they make a mistake? Wouldn't they be harming their own child? Because of this, these nannies are truly caught in a dilemma. They don't dare ask their superiors for permission to conduct interrogations, because if they made such a request, they would surely be questioned by some madman. The emperor. Why must you use your mouth to ask? Can't you just inspect them directly? How would they answer then? Could they possibly say, to be honest, Your Majesty, we can't actually tell just by looking. But if we interrogate them a bit, we might be able to trick one or two into confessing. If they dared to say that, they wouldn't need to bother living in the palace anymore. They could be dragged out and buried alive. Thinking about how one wrong step could implicate their entire families, the nannies couldn't help but tremble. Just then, the first row of young ladies slowly walked in. Today, the tension in the court was palpable. The hall was silent as a tomb. No one spoke. Everyone was quietly waiting for news from the inner palace. Before long, a young eunuch entered and reporting to Your Majesty. All participants have been counted. All the young ladies on the list are present. They are divided into 10 rows. The first row has begun to enter. The eunuch said this as he presented the registration list. The emperor took the list, casually placed it aside without looking at it, and waved the eunuch away. Hearing that the inspection had begun and the first row had entered, the ministers standing below were so nervous they had to secretly wipe their sweat. Who knew if their own daughter was in that first row? About the time it takes to drink 2 cups of tea, the eunuch finally returned and reported, "Perth. Reporting to your majesty. The first row has been inspected. What is the result? All are pure." "Very good." Hearing the result, the ministers let out a small sigh of relief, their clenched jaws relaxing slightly. They continued to wait. Another 2 tea times passed. The eunuch entered again. "Reporting to your majesty, the second row has been inspected. All are pure." The emperor, satisfied, waved the eunuch away. This repeated several times. Every report was the same: pure, pure. All are pure. The ministers gradually relaxed. The morning court session had ended long ago, but not a single official left. They all continued to stand and wait. Finally, on the 10th report, the eunuch entered and announced the familiar words, "All are pure." When the emperor heard this, a distinct, collective sigh of relief echoed through the court. Looking closely, everyone was secretly wiping away sweat. Only Prime Minister Ning, standing at the front, remained calm and composed, a stark contrast to the anxious and uneasy officials. The emperor smiled and nodded. "My dear minister, we have observed that your expression has not changed at all. You must have great confidence in your daughter." Father raised his head proudly, then humbly bowed. "Your majesty flatters me. Although I am untalented, I believe my family's conduct is upright, especially my eldest daughter, who is both intelligent and virtuous. She would certainly never do anything wrong or disappoint your majesty's grace." "Good, very good." The emperor clapped his hands and laughed, then immediately issued an edict. "We bestow upon the eldest daughter of the Ning family, Elena, the title of Princess of Serenity, with a fief of 1,000 households. Furthermore, grant 100 taels of gold, a jade, coral artifact, a royal scepter, and a measure of luminous night pearls." Father immediately knelt to give thanks, shouting, "Long live your majesty." The remaining officials looked at him with envy, but no one dared to say a word. The storm caused by this inspection had truly terrified everyone in the court. Looking at the civil and military officials cowering like quails, no longer their usual boisterous selves, the emperor smiled again, satisfied. The edict granting the title of princess was sent to the residence at the same time, honor, as father returned from court. His face beaming, he led the entire family in kneeling to thank the emperor's grace. Seeing me accept the edict, seeing the stream of rewards being carried into my courtyard, and hearing the eunuch respectfully call me, Her Highness the Princess, Matilda's face twisted in anger, but she could do nothing. After I saw the decree, delivering eunuch off, father immediately called me to the study for a discussion. I didn't go right away. Instead, I held the edict, walked slowly over to Matilda and smiled faintly. "Wah. Stepmother, your daughter has been ennobled as a princess. Are you happy for me?" Matilda gripped her own daughter's hand, not answering, just glaring at me with resentment. The smile on my face widened. After sufficiently savoring Matilda's suppressed fury, I turned and walked towards father's study. The moment I entered, father clapped his hands and laughed. "Elena, you are truly father's brilliant Munsan." The court's reaction, his majesty's thoughts, the balance of power in the inner palace, you held it all in the palm of your hand. Truly your wisdom is extraordinary, extraordinary. Through this, not only did the Ning family's reputation remain unscathed, but we also won his majesty's favor. We have truly brought honor to the Ning family. Ha! Let those old fools be jealous. Why couldn't they produce a daughter as talented and brilliant as my Elena? I bowed my head and smiled, saying nothing. Father laughed happily to himself for a while, before realizing I had been standing for a while. He quickly pulled out a chair and helped me sit down. "You've been standing so long, you must be tired. Sit down. From now on, you don't need to observe formalities with father." "Thank you for the seat, father." I quickly stood up, curtsied, and then sat down again. Father saw how meticulous I was and couldn't help but laugh. But you're right, you are the Princess of Serenity now. Every word and action must be flawless. It's good to be careful. The other children in the house should learn from you. If they had half your intelligence and self-control, father would have nothing more to worry about." I nodded. "Father is right. I also have a matter I wish to discuss with you." "Go ahead." Father gestured for me to speak freely as he walked to the tea table to pour me a cup. "Father, the matter of my innocence is now clear. Simon Gu can no longer make trouble over it. But we have ultimately made an enemy of the Gu family. If we do not eradicate them root and branch, I fear endless trouble in the future. Father's busy back paused for a moment, then his seemingly unconcerned voice replied, Elena, don't worry. That scoundrel Gu is just a fifth-rank official. Father, I fear the backer of the Gu family is not a simple fifth-rank official. I took the tea from father, took a small sip, and said quietly, Father, not long ago, when your daughter was captured by bandits, guess what my maternal family did, besides killing all the bandits? Father frowned. What else? They searched the entire bandit lair and found these letters. I took out the evidence proving Ethan's collusion with the bandits and placed it before father. He examined the letters one by one, his frown deepening. Impossible, how could the Gu family? That's right, no matter how you look at it, the Gu family doesn't seem capable of supporting such a large bandit lair. With Simon Gu's meager salary, he struggles just to feed his family, let alone sponsor a group of bandits. The Gu family must have a backer. Father's gaze grew colder. I nodded. Exactly. Moreover, this person is certainly no one ordinary in the court. The possible candidates can be counted on one hand. My father looked up, his eyes full of hidden meaning, meeting my cold, vigilant gaze. Must make a move first. Father deliberated for 3 days, then summoned me to the study again. Elena, there are currently no signs of a struggle for the title of Crown Prince. If we rashly participate and choose a side, it is truly too risky. I think we should set this aside for now. I wasn't surprised. After all, this old man always loved to put on an act, pretending to be a pure, loyal minister. I said nothing, but led father to my courtyard. In my garden, I had placed a pot containing 2 seedlings. Father, please look. Father glanced at it, confused. What did you plant here? What they are is not important. I pointed to the pot and said in a low voice, What's important is that this pot can only sustain one plant. The other plant will inevitably be culled. Right now, I am just waiting for them to fight for nutrients, waiting for them to determine a winner. Then, I will remove the weaker one, so the stronger one can have the pot to itself. Father clearly understood what I was implying. He glared at me coldly, angry at my audacity, but I remained unmoved and continued, Father, the moment I planted the second seedling, the struggle had already begun. And as they grow, the competition will only. Father, please think carefully. It is easy to add flowers to brocade, but hard to send charcoal in a snowstorm. After saying this, I bowed to father and turned to leave. Father stood before the pot, staring at the 2 seedlings, silent for a long time. 3 days later, father summoned me again. This time, as soon as he saw me, he spoke. Elena, you are right. The struggle began long ago, it's just not public. But if we wait until the fight, it's at its peak to join, I'm afraid there will be no place left for us. I smiled inwardly. This old man really knew how to act. He had clearly been in secret contact with the third prince for a long time, even planning a marriage alliance. Even that old fox Simon Go knew about it. Yet, in front of me, he still pretended to be a pure, loyal minister. To get him to finally speak openly, I had to coax him and use this plant metaphor. 6 days of scheming, and still, he was playing this role. It really isn't easy to discuss core interests with him. Father, you have no idea that I've already seen through your true nature as a gambler. He continued to act troubled. But the current situation is very ambiguous. All the great families are watching. Choosing a side rashly is very dangerous. Where should we even begin? Watching him act, I couldn't help but laugh coldly to myself. In reality, he had another choice: don't join the fight, become a pure, loyal minister. But as a loyal minister, he would face a very likely outcome. When the new emperor ascends the throne, the new dynasty will choose its dragon-following supporters as its pillars. Meanwhile, father, in his loyal minister status, having made no contribution and even refusing to pick a side, would likely be resented by the new emperor and pushed out of his position as prime minister. After all, emperors who can tolerate and value loyal ministers are rare, enlightened rulers. But how many enlightened rulers are there in history? Father doesn't dare bet on the new emperor being one. Once pushed out of the court, the Ning family would fall from its peak of prosperity into poverty. His old colleagues and rivals, like Simon Gu, might become his superiors, trampling him underfoot. How could father endure that? He couldn't even bear the thought. So he must fight, and moreover, he must win. See, human nature is just that simple, that easy to grasp. The path a person chooses is dictated by their personality. Elena, where do you think we should start? Father, seeing me lost in thought, pressed again. I broke from my reverie, looked up at father, and smiled gently. Father, marry me into the Gu family. Father, I know he must think I'm mad, but he has navigated the court for too long and learned the survival skill, known as perfect composure, so, even my shocking words didn't cause the slightest crack in his mask. He just used his deep, suspicious eyes to scrutinize me. I know what he's thinking. The original host's father, this prime minister, is fundamentally a gambler. He was born into a noble family, but it declined. The wealth and glory he enjoyed in his youth vanished like smoke during his years of hard study, along with his family's status. His first wife also passed away. My mother, a peerless beauty like her, was not for commoners. Only the high nobility could possess such a woman. When my father was no longer a man of power, a peony, like my mother, who needed to be nurtured by riches, could not continue to exist. Mother's passing meant that the wealthy life father had enjoyed since childhood was also gone. Therefore, my father had no time to grieve for her, because he knew he could not endure a life of poverty. He had to find a way to quickly return to his former position. But in this dog-eat-dog world, with such rigid social classes, once you fall, how can you easily climb back up? For father to return to the wealthy elite in the shortest possible time, the only way was to gamble. Not with money in a casino, but with his entire life. He chose Matilda, the daughter of a wealthy family in Hangzhou. He gambled his entire life on her, and he won. Matilda was a woman blinded by love. She clearly could have controlled her husband, kept him from flying too high. She could have kept him in the palm of her hand, making him please her for his entire life. But instead, she used all her family's resources to support him, allowing him to become the prime minister before the age of 50. She gave everything, but that husband did not give her the respect and love she deserved. Because in his eyes, all his current power and wealth were won through his own gamble, not begged for, from others. Father had won, and he believed it was his own ability, having nothing to do with Matilda's love for him. Gamblers are terrifying, but what's more terrifying than a gambler is a gambler who has won big, and what's more terrifying than a gambler who has won big, a gambler who has won too much. Won so much that they've surpassed their own class limits. Therefore, my dear father has become accustomed to gambling. He even intentionally seeks out gambles, using any means necessary. Father's own talent combined with his noble lineage and, most importantly, the financial backing of the Chen family, has meant that father has never lost a gamble in decades. Father has truly walked a smooth path, almost never tasting hardship. Because of this, he firmly believes that gambling is right, that it is necessary, and that he must continue to gamble. If he wins this gamble, the Ning family will become imperial relatives. He has already achieved the rank of prime minister, after all, but human greed is limitless. This father, who has already reached the pinnacle of power, now wants to climb even higher. It is inevitable, just as the princes will surely fight for the throne. To enter the ranks of the imperial family, what he needs is a good stepping stone, a suitable chess piece. The stepping stone in the past was Matilda. The stepping stone now is me. Ever since I revealed my superior cunning, father began to realize I was different from his other children. He realized I could become an even more outstanding chess piece. If, in his eyes, I was just a pawn at first, then now, I am a rook. A pawn can only become a consort, but a rook can aim for the position of empress. The heart of a gambler like father began to stir. He was eager to act. He wanted to bet. Bet on the entire empire. Bet on the supreme throne. Bet that the next crown prince would be born from my womb. The thought made his blood boil. So how could he possibly let an important rook, like me, fall into dire straits by marrying into the Gu family? He was waiting to use this rook to charge across the board. But I did not immediately explain why I wanted him to marry me into the Gu family. First, I went to the tea table, poured him a cup of tea myself, and respectfully presented it. Then, I stood behind him and began to massage his shoulders with just the right amount of force. Father, didn't Censor Gu say in court that you are close with the third prince and want to marry me to him? Father must have already secretly conveyed this intention to the third prince, correct? Father had no reaction to my probing. His breathing was even, as if he had fallen asleep. I continued to massage his shoulders, and continued to speak. His Majesty has delayed appointing a crown prince simply because, among the current princes, there is no one he truly wants to choose. We ministers have already clashed fiercely with His Majesty over this. The number of officials punished for urging him to appoint a crown prince is countless. The number beaten with the cane and dragged away is not just one or two. If father marries me to the most supported candidate for crown prince, the third prince, at this juncture, regardless of whether I am the main wife or a concubine. It means that at this critical moment, you are standing in direct opposition to His Majesty. Father, what is the fate of a prime minister who has lost the emperor's favor? Your predecessor, and even your predecessor's predecessor, are glaring examples. Father's hand, resting on the table, suddenly trembled slightly. I smiled. Therefore, Father, choosing a side is necessary, but we cannot openly oppose His Majesty at this sensitive time. We need to change our approach, to act covertly. Tell me your thoughts. Father finally spoke. I thought to myself, this old fox, he really won't show his hand until he sees the prize. But at least this time, he was willing to discuss the real, core issues with me, no longer pretending. I dropped my hands, walked around to sit opposite him, and said seriously, Father, do you know who is backing the Gu family? Father was silent, but his eyes were dark and terrifying. He was clearly running through all the suspects in his mind. I gave him the answer directly. It is Duke Zheng. Duke Zheng, the third prince's maternal uncle. Father's expression didn't change, but his face was still covered in dark clouds. Clearly, he had already suspected Duke Zheng. As their proof, Father stared at me. He wasn't doubting the answer, but wanted concrete evidence. I nodded. The proof was delivered into Father's hands long ago. Those letters between Ethan and the bandits are the proof. What do you mean, Elena? The paper used for the letters Ethan sent to the bandits is white deer vellum, produced by the Jinlong workshop in Jingzhou. White deer vellum is made using a secret method. The paper is thin, light, soft yet durable, whiter than snow, and has a lingering fragrance. Because of its jade-like purity, smooth writing surface, and clear ink absorption, it has long been designated as a tribute item for the palace, reserved exclusively for the use of the imperial family. Father frowned. From a secret compartment in the bookshelf, he took out the letters and held them up to the light to compare. It is indeed white deer vellum. Father threw the letters down on the table, and sneered. I tidied the letters on the table and continued slowly. In the past 6 months, white deer vellum has only left the palace once. That was when His Majesty, during the Plum Blossom Banquet, gifted 10 reams of it to the third prince. Many people know this. It's no great secret. Therefore, the only way Ethan could have white deer vellum is if the third prince secretly gave it to him. But why would Ethan use that paper in this situation? Because he doesn't dare use it publicly. White deer vellum is highly indicative. However, Ethan is the type who can never do anything quietly. His show-off nature made him unable to resist using white deer vellum when contacting the bandits as a subtle way to flaunt his noble connections. Father mused, shaking his head in disagreement. Not necessarily. Many nobles in the palace possess white deer vellum. Someone else could have given it to Ethan. Impossible. I picked up a sheet of the delicate paper, held it to my nose, and sniffed gently. The white deer vellum that His Majesty gifted to the third prince was not the ordinary kind. It was an improved version called imperial deer vellum. The biggest difference is that imperial deer vellum is supplemented with gold leaf and ambergris. Hearing this, Father instinctively picked up a letter and sniffed it. But he is no expert on incense, so he couldn't determine if the faint fragrance was the legendary ambergris. He looked at me, a trace of doubt in his eyes. I smiled calmly and said, of course, a little ambergris is nothing to the third prince, but to use such a precious tribute item to reward a trusted subordinate is enough to show his favor. I tore a small scrap from the blank part of the letter, lit a candle, and held the paper over the flame. The moment the paper met the heat, it released an elegant fragrance that filled the room and lingered, undissipated. This unique scent completely convinced Father. It is indeed ambergris. This means the Gu family truly has an early connection with the third prince. Father said this, his face still calm, but I knew that in his heart, rage was already surging. Father's nature has always been if he loves someone, he wants them to live, if he hates someone, he wants them to die. The Gu family had dared to slander the Ning family. Father must have wanted to destroy them for a long time. He just didn't expect the Gu family to be one step ahead and to have already climbed onto the very great tree he was targeting. What terrible luck. Then, the person behind the scenes, who arranged for the bandits to capture you, who wanted to destroy your purity, was the third prince. Father's index finger tapped rhythmically on the stack of letters. I sat beside him silently, saying no more. Having said this much, I believed Father had already made his decision. The collective inspection of the noble ladies had just settled down, but the capital was in an uproar once again. The reason was that the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's residence, the newly titled Princess of Serenity, Elen, was stubbornly insisting on marrying down into the Gu family. Such a foolishly infatuated act was truly unheard of. In an instant the entire capital was abuzz. People chattered until their mouths were dry, fearing their neighbors hadn't yet heard this sensational and colorful news. The tea houses, big and small, were packed with people discussing the affair. Which Gu family? Is it the Gu family that accused the princess of being impure? That's right. It's that Gu family. Heavens, has the Princess of Serenity lost her mind? The Gu family slandered her so badly, and she still dares to marry him. That just shows how inexplicable love is. You gentlemen don't know, the Gu family's eldest son, Ethan, is the princess's childhood sweetheart. He's handsome, talented, and has such a sweet tongue. Hasn't he infatuated the princess to the point where she says if it's not him, I won't marry? Heavens. What's to be done? The Prime Minister must be furious. He's so mad he's personally gone to Censor Gu's residence twice to beat him up. He said Censor Gu doesn't know how to raise his son, that he used a sweet tongue and despicable tricks to bewitch a decent man's daughter. Oh, it's just too much to listen to. Too much, Pa. Don't say it's too much. Hurry up and tell us the details. My throat is dry from talking. How can I tell it without a jug of good wine? Waiter, bring the wine. It must be your best Enyer Hong. Quickly. All over the capital, everyone had turned into a curious gossip, scratching their heads and ears every day waiting to hear the story, discuss the gossip, and eat the melon, savoring every bite. Why was this melon gossip so delicious? Because it was not only sensational, but it kept getting updated. Today, it's the Princess of Serenity insisting on marrying into the Gu family. Tomorrow, it's the Prime Minister himself going to the censor's residence to give him a beating. The day after, it's the Princess of Serenity kneeling and begging her father to agree to the marriage. The Prime Minister faints from anger on the spot, frightening the princess, who hugs her father, wailing that she won't get married anymore, she won't. The day after that, the Gu family's eldest son, Ethan, along with the Gu clan elders, comes to the residence to propose, kneeling and begging the Prime Minister to agree. In the end, the Prime Minister chases them out with a broom. Oh my heavens, this melon is endless, you simply can't eat it all. It's just too interesting. Chomp 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 chomp. Is there any new gossip? I'm counting on this for my daily entertainment. Chomp 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 chomp. This back and forth drama dragged on for half a month. Everyone thought the two families were about to gather their clansmen and go to war, that it wouldn't end until blood flowed in the streets. But the result? The Prime Minister announced that he couldn't sway his beloved daughter's will and had no choice but to agree to the marriage, holding his nose. Censor Gu, relying on his son's handsome, elegant appearance and sweet talking, had successfully held on to the princess's heart. He finally won a round. Immediately, the entire capital was in an uproar. Families with daughters rushed home to educate them, warning them 1,000 times not to be as foolish as the Princess of Serenity. That was too frightening. Families with sons, on the other hand, turned to reprimand them, their faces full of disappointment. Look at Ethan. He even managed to trick a princess. And you? All you do all day is fool around. You can't even find a decent bride. Ever since the engagement, Censor Gu's mouth rarely closed, he was always smiling from ear to ear. And the Prime Minister? Of course, he didn't even spare them a glance. He only instructed Matilda Chen to handle the wedding arrangements. Other than that, he didn't interfere. Out of sight, out of mind. He even spread word outside. Just consider me as not having this daughter. Someone claimed to have seen the Prime Minister in a private room of a tea house, drinking and weeping bitterly. Such a good daughter. Why did she insist on marrying that Gu family brat? My heart, it hurts. I can't bear it. His mouth said consider me as not having this daughter, but the betrothal gifts were sent over in endless waves, one after another, all prepared to the 10-mile red dowry standard, and so, the entire capital knew the Prime Minister was all bark and no bite. In reality, he was a doting father who loved his daughter dearly, soft-hearted beyond imagination. Everyone also understood the Princess of Serenity's, status and importance in my father's heart. No one doubted that even after I was married, father would still dote on me as before. I got my wish and married Ethan. On the wedding night, Ethan still hadn't entered the bridal chamber. The messaging matrons were sent one after another. Each one returned saying the groom was still drinking with guests. Seeing that the guests had all left, and the basic formalities had been observed, I dismissed the matrons, washed my face, changed my clothes, and lay down comfortably in bed to rest. Cixi and Huanzi were so angry they nearly bit through their handkerchiefs over this good-for-nothing groom. I was secretly amused, but I kept a calm expression, merely telling them to go rest some, leaving just one maid for the night watch. There was no need to be angry over something that was entirely expected. Ethan knew I was no longer a pure maiden. He must have been extremely uncomfortable in his heart, so naturally, he wouldn't treat me well. Besides, he never had any real feelings for me. All the sweet words he said before, even when my father chased him 3 streets with a broom, he stubbornly refused to give up on marrying me. It was all for his own benefit. Now that he had married me, he didn't need to pretend anymore. He didn't even bother to enter the bridal chamber. He was clearly trying to put me in my place. He was truly a descendant of the Gu family, a clan of black-hearted people. I pulled the blanket over me, put on an eye mask, and, letting the dragon and phoenix candles burn brightly, I fell asleep peacefully in the brightly lit room. The next day, when a reeking of alcohol Ethan pushed open the door, everything in my room was already in order. I myself was resting comfortably. He turned his head to look out the window, saw the sun was already high and bright, then looked at me, leaning back on a small couch, reading a book and nibbling on fruit, looking completely relaxed and at ease. He couldn't help but frown. "Elena, why aren't you properly dressed and coiffed? What time is it? We still have to go pay respects to father and mother." I glanced at him and smiled gently. "Husband, there's no need to worry. I have already been to see father-in-law and mother-in-law. I also successfully received the household management token from mother-in-law. Everything there is settled." At this point, I seemed to remember something and added a thoughtful-sounding sentence. "If husband is feeling tired, you can go back to your room and rest. I will have a maid prepare a sobering soup for you." "You've already been." He seized on the key words, completely shocked. "How can that be? How can the new bride go pay respects to her in-laws by herself? Where does that leave me? And the management token? How could mother have given it to you the moment she met you?" I smiled, putting down the piece of fruit I was eating. I wiped my mouth with a handkerchief, then picked up the management token from the table and dangled it in front of him. "Husband, you were dead drunk last night and didn't even enter the bridal chamber. You must be exhausted. How could I dare disturb your sweet dreams? Besides, mother-in-law was very pleased with me. She was so eager to give me the management token, saying that from now on, all of the Gu family's household affairs are mine to manage. It's hard for me to refuse mother-in-law's loving heart. That's why I'm preparing to gather the servants to assign their duties and start planning the fugu banquet for next month." As I said this, Cixi promptly stepped forward to report, "Your Highness, the household account books, the various stewards, and the managers of several shops are all waiting in the courtyard for your instructions." I nodded. "Then let's go." Huanzi, seeing me stand up, immediately brought a cloak over. I adjusted my clothes and walked straight out. As I passed Ethan, I maintained my gentle smile, my tone conciliatory. "Husband, you have always been an elegant man, like the bright moon. You don't need to worry about such trivial matters. You have me, husband, rest assured." Ethan, these mundane management affairs of the Gu family didn't even require me, a major weapon, to act. Cixi alone was more than capable of handling everything. I had often hugged my Cixi and told her, "If we were in the modern world, you would at least be a department manager at a large company. Managing dozens of people would be no problem." Cixi didn't understand my words, but was very happy to be favored by me. "Sharing your burden, Your Highness, is my duty." The Fugu pufferfish banquet, under Cixi's supervision, began preparations in full swing. Fugu banquets were currently fashionable in the capital. Even though one occasionally heard of diners being poisoned and dying, the exquisite taste of the fish made it irresistible. As such, chefs in the capital who were skilled in preparing fugu saw their salaries skyrocket. With my abundant resource, I hired 5 fugu chefs at once, each with over 10 years of experience. Sparing no expense to treat them well, my only hope was to host a brilliant and famous fugu banquet 1 month later. When I announced this intention, my mother-in-law, Lady Wang, was overjoyed at my generosity. She didn't just hand over the management token with both hands, she went everywhere bragging, "My son is so fortunate to have married the princess. Look, aren't we about to host a fugu banquet? All the big names in the capital will be coming to enjoy it." Everyone felt that the Gu family was trying to ride my coattails to advance their status. On the night of the Fugu banquet, the Gu residence was adorned with lanterns and flowers, illuminating the entire courtyard. Musicians were even invited to play by the gate. A stage was set up in the courtyard, with actors performing operas. The sound of singing mingled with the bustling crowd. I sat at the head seat, smiling and nodding at each guest who arrived. Ethan wanted to pull me to the gate to greet guests with him, but I flatly refused. The main table must be aired by someone of high status. Otherwise, with guests swarming in like headless flies, wouldn't it be chaos? Just that one phrase, high status, choked off all of Ethan's words in his throat. The 5 veteran chefs stood in a neat row in the middle of the hall, each with a small workstation, directly demonstrating their exquisite knife skills as they prepared the fugu. The guests watched intently, oohing and ahing in amazement. Besides the main dish of fugu being prepared in the front hall, other dishes, exquisite in color, aroma, and presentation, were brought out from the back kitchen, quickly filling the tables. The guests, seeing the spread, drooled, unable to contain their excitement. The main table where I sat was also packed, mostly with Gu family relatives. They paid no mind to my status as a princess. The moment the food was served, they helped themselves, eating heartily without a word of thanks. Instead, they just urged the fugu to be served faster. When the 5 chefs had all finished preparing the fugu, they brought the dishes to each table. As they served each table, they had to use chopsticks to pick up a piece of fish and taste it themselves. The main table, of course, was served first. When the fugu was brought up, a chef immediately picked a piece from the platter and tasted it. At this moment, I clearly saw my mother-in-law, Lady Wang, start to rise from her seat, obviously wanting to stop the chef. She felt that such precious fugu, how could a mere servant eat it first? It was truly a loss of face for the Gu family. Thinking this, she even dared to glare at me with resentment. I paid her no mind, simply signaling for Cixi to step forward and explain. Cixi's voice was clear. These are all expert fugu chefs with over 10 years of experience. To prove the fish they prepared is non-poisonous, the chefs will taste a piece themselves at the table. We ask for our esteemed guests' understanding. Hearing Cixi's explanation, Lady Wang finally realized she had almost made a huge fool of herself. Her face flushed red, and she awkwardly sat back down, not daring to say another word. The Gu family relatives at the table, however, secretly rejoiced, saying they were receiving the same treatment as the emperor. Hearing this, I just felt it was ridiculous. When all the dishes were served, I was the first to pick up the meat of fugu. The meat is tender, the flavor exquisite, truly a delicacy. I ate with an enraptured expression, murmuring praises. The Gu family, seeing me eat the fugu without any issues, immediately raised their chopsticks, afraid they would miss out if they were too slow. The moment the fugu entered their mouths, they all praised it lavishly. Lady Wang ate and sighed. No wonder the nobles must have fugu banquets during the season. Even if some die from it, they still want to eat. You really can't blame them. It's just too delicious. I ate 2 pieces of fish, then put down my chopsticks and began to drink the cherry wine I had brewed myself. Seeing this, Lady Wang also wanted to drink it. I glanced at her and said softly, "This is wine brewed by this princess herself." The implication was that she was not worthy to drink it, but Lady Wang pretended not to understand and insisted. I sighed and poured her a cup. Fine drink. After all, I am generous. Lady Wang, seeing me obediently pour the wine, beamed and drained the cup. I pretended to be angered by her, put on a cold face, and randomly picked at 2 dishes. Then, I used the excuse of feeling unwell and needing some fresh air. Lady Wang thought I was having a tantrum. The corners of her lips curled in satisfaction as she let me leave with my maids. Even though I was the Gu family's daughter-in-law, I was always pressing down on her, so she was already eager for me to be gone. I had only been strolling in the courtyard for a short while when I saw a servant boy frantically run over, tripping and tumbling, shouting, "Something's wrong! Something's wrong! Someone is dead!" At that time, I was strolling and chatting with the other officials' wives. Because everyone didn't like the noise of the banquet, so they had only sat for a moment before stepping out for fresh air. As luck would have it, I ran into the ladies, and we began to stroll together. We hadn't gone far when we heard the servant boys shout, "Something's wrong! Someone is dead!" The ladies were terrified and froze, asking, "What happened? Speak slowly." The servant boy, his face streaked with tears, was clearly in extreme terror. He stammered, "It's terrible, Your Highness. The old master, the old madam, the young master and all the Gu family elders, in short, the entire table, they've all collapsed." What? I was so startled I didn't even think, just hiked up my skirts and ran toward the main hall. The other ladies, hearing this, immediately followed me. When I arrived, the hall was in chaos. Everyone had scattered, their eyes fixed on the main table, whispering amongst themselves. I heard very clearly someone say, "It must be the Fugu. They've been poisoned." The main table was a disaster. The Gu family members who had been gathered there were all slumped on the ground, white foam spilling from their mouths. Some were still convulsing, others were already motionless. Lady Wang had died in a horrific posture, her 5 fingers curled like hooks, clutching her husband's robes. Simon Gu was no better. He had clutched his chest as he fell, pulling the entire tablecloth with him. Dishes and bowls had overturned onto his body, covering him in the remnants of soup and rice. Ethan had a strong constitution. When I arrived, he was still breathing, but it was shallow. He was only breathing out, barely breathing in. What shocked everyone was that the only ones poisoned were the Gu family. All the guests, as well as the Fugu chefs, were perfectly fine. Everyone stared in stunned silence at the fallen Gu family members, unsure what to do. I acted terrified, covering my mouth with a handkerchief and shouting, "Someone, call for help. Send for the physicians. Hurry." The servants scrambled to fetch them. Cici took charge, directing servants to maintain order and calmly advising the guests to leave. However, many guests stubbornly refused to leave, insistent on watching the drama unfold. Seeing this, Cici didn't force them. She merely guided them to the courtyard to rest, thoughtfully preparing tea and fruit so they could enjoy the show in comfort. The guests all praised the princess, noting that even her maid was quick-witted. Soon, the physicians rushed in and were led to the main hall. The guests immediately grabbed their tea and fruit and crowded the doorway, craning their necks to watch. They saw the physicians squatting down to treat the victims, inducing vomiting and applying acupuncture. They tried every method they knew, but in the end, the physicians were powerless. They could only watch as the patients gasped their last breaths. Finally, they stood up, walked over to me, and shook their heads, expressing that they had done all they could and hoped I would bear the grief. I immediately fainted on the spot, falling into Huanzi's arms. "Your Highness. Don't scare us. Physicians, quickly, check on Her Highness. She can't have anything happen to her." The guests, who had witnessed everything from the beginning, sighed and shook their heads. Not long after, the constables arrived. They sealed the main hall, preventing the guests from crowding the doorway. But the guests still refused to leave, insisting on staying in the courtyard to see the matter to its end. Since many of the guests had high status, the constables didn't dare force them out, simply ignoring them as they stood watching and eating fruit. As the fainting victim, I was carried out of the main hall. Cici intentionally had me brought to the courtyard, where she used smelling salts down to revive me. I woke up weakly, right in front of the gossiping, fruit-eating guests, and immediately burst into tears. How could this happen? I ate plenty of the fugu myself. Why? Why is this happening? I cried until I could barely breathe, lamenting my cursed fate, insisting that someone must have conspired to harm the Gu family. A moment later, I began to blame my mother-in-law, Lady Wang, for not handing over the entire management of the banquet to me, allowing this oversight to happen without my knowledge. The guests grew even more interested, and the chatter grew louder. Before long, the constables and coroners, after examining the scene and conferring with the physicians, came out to the courtyard to find me. I was crying from exhaustion. Seeing their leader approach, I struggled to stand up from Huanzi's embrace. "Captain Lin, this was definitely a deliberate poisoning to harm the entire Gu family. I beg you to find justice for them." Captain Lin looked at me with an expression that was both pitying and skeptical. "Your Highness," he said slowly, "I have a few questions I must ask you." "Captain Lin, please ask," I replied, wiping my tears. "Your Highness, did you also eat the fugu?" I nodded weakly. "Yes, I did. As the hostess, I had to be the first to touch the chopsticks so everyone else could eat. It is proper etiquette." "And the chefs who made the fugu also ate. They ate right in front of us." CC chimed in. Captain Lin asked again, "Why was there a sour soup served at the main table, but not at the other tables?" That was a special request from my mother-in-law. As an appetizer. I felt a sour soup was inappropriate for a fugu banquet, so I only placed it on the main table to appease her. The other tables did not have it. "And did your Highness taste every dish on the table?" I looked bewildered, as if trying to recall. I think I tasted most of them." I looked to CC for confirmation. CC immediately stepped in. I was in charge of serving Her Highness. I placed almost every dish on her plate, so, almost? Captain Lin, sharp as a hawk, seized on the word. Almost. You mean there was a dish you didn't serve to Her Highness? But of course. She said, her voice full of pride. Her Highness is of noble birth. She cannot be expected to put just anything in her mouth. And which dish was that? It was that sour soup. She announced, her face full of disdain. A fugu banquet is the height of elegance. Every single dish was personally curated by Her Highness. It was supposed to be perfect. But who would have thought? The old madam insisted on adding a sour soup to the menu. Captain Lin frowned. What is wrong with sour soup? Sour soup. That is a coarse dish for commoners on the street. How could our princess eat such a thing? A fugu banquet is the pinnacle of refinement. Adding a sour soup, what sense does that make? Our princess didn't want it, but she couldn't win the argument. The old madam insisted that the old master loved it and it must be served. They say filial piety is greater than heaven. Since the old master and old madam both insisted, the princess had to obey. But obeying is one thing, our princess would absolutely never eat such a thing. From start to finish, I never served her a single bite of that soup. How could I? It's vulgar. I let Cixi do the talking, only bowing my head to weep silently. Captain Lin understood. He turned to the constables behind him. The physicians are still here. Tell them to check the sour soup for poison. Hearing this, I quickly interjected, Captain Lin, all the other dishes today were prepared by my own kitchen staff. Only that sour soup was made by Nanny Qiao. But Nanny Qiao has served my mother-in-law for many years. She is her confidante. Even if she wanted to harm me, she would never harm her own mistress. Captain Lin said gravely, perhaps there are hidden details. Please, Your Highness. I nodded, tears in my eyes. A short while later, a constable returned to report. There is no poison in the sour soup. But it was indeed the sour soup that killed them. Captain Lin's eyebrows shot together. Are you trying to give me a riddle? The physicians quickly stepped in to explain. There is no strong poison in the soup, like arsenic. However, the soup itself ingested is fatal. The cause is that it was not fresh. It was spoiled. It had deteriorated. My face showed even more bewilderment. How could it not be fresh? Nanny Qiao just cooked it this afternoon. It was less than 2 hours before the banquet. How could it have deteriorated? The physicians waved their hands. Even if it was freshly cooked. If the ingredients will, the resulting dish cannot be eaten. This. I again looked at Cixi. Cixi nodded emphatically. Your Highness, that sour soup was handled by Nanny Qiao from start to finish. Even the ingredients were taken from the Gu family's own kitchen. We had no oversight in this matter. Captain Lin immediately ordered, bring Nanny Qiao here. He also personally went to the Gu family kitchen to inspect the ingredient storage. Nanny Qiao was dragged in, her eyes already swollen from crying. She pointed to a sack of corn in the corner. I used that to make it. I've made this dish for the old madam for my entire life and never had a problem. The physicians opened the sack. On the surface, the corn cobs looked fine. But when they leaned in, they could smell a faint, musty odor, the unmistakable scent of spoilage. This is it. This corn is the cause of the tragedy. The physicians shook their heads. All of this corn has deteriorated. Hearing this, I flew into a rage, pointing a trembling finger at Nanny Qiao's and screamed, You wolf in sheep's clothing. Mother-in-law treated you so well, yet you were so stingy you refused to use fresh corn to make her soup. Guards, drag this wicked woman down. Take her. The rest of my words were cut off. I clutched my chest, as if in extreme pain, and fainted again into Huanzi's arms. Nanny Qiao, hearing this, was terrified. She collapsed to the ground, kowtowing and wailing, Your Highness, spare me. I have made this soup for the mistress. My whole life, never once making a mistake. This batch of corn was purchased by the household steward. I told him this corn was no longer fresh. But the steward said, it's just a sour soup. Who cares if it's not fresh? At a fugu banquet with so many delicacies, who is going to pay attention to a sour soup? So I had no choice. If I had known using this corn would kill the master and mistress, I would have died before I used it. Hearing Nanny Qiao's tragic wails, I peacefully fainted for good. The rest of this had nothing to do with me. Boncrecic acid, a toxin with an extremely high mortality rate often found in deteriorated corn products, spoiled fresh white fungus, and other spoiled starches. See, killing people is really so simple. My mission for marrying into the Gu family was complete. In less than a month of being married, my entire family-in-law was dead. I was innocent, beyond reproach. But even though they had died from their own carelessness and food poisoning, I could not escape being labeled a husband jinx. This is, after all, a deeply feudal ancient story. But I didn't care in the slightest. The Gu family hung white mourning banners. I wore funeral robes, standing in the mourning hall before Ethan's coffin, crying until I was a mess. Husband, how could you be so cruel? We never even shared our wedding night. You didn't even leave me a child. How could you just abandon me like this? As I cried, I slammed my fists on the floor, my face contorted in agony. Suddenly, a mocking female voice sounded from above me. It seems even the high and mighty princess fails to keep a man's heart. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth couldn't help but curl up. As I was bowed in grief, I quickly composed my expression. When I looked up, my face was again delicate and bewildered, my tear-filled eyes evoking pity. Who are you? Before even half a day had passed, a new scandal spread, becoming the new topic for all the gossips. According to those who went to pay respects at the Gu mourning hall, a very pregnant woman had appeared. This woman loudly declared she was a mistress Ethan had been keeping, and that she was carrying his child in her belly. She was here to claim the family inheritance. Facing this, the Princess of Serenity was completely unable to refute her, because she had only just married in, and more importantly, she had never consummated the marriage. This fact was exposed during their confrontation, and was undeniable. Even if the Princess of Serenity had wanted to lie and claim she had been with Ethan, the woman revealed another shocking secret. Before he even married the princess, Ethan was already incapable of being a husband. The woman even produced a medical record from a clinic outside the city. It clearly stated that Ethan had suffered a fall from a horse, severely damaging his foundation. He was completely unable to fulfill his husbandly duties. Seeing the medical record, the princess's eyes widened and she blurted out, "No wonder, no wonder." With the medical record and Ethan's personal token as proof, the fetus in the woman's belly was now the only Gu family bloodline, leaving the Princess of Serenity with no way to argue. The princess, from anger and humiliation, fainted on the spot. The attending physician said she could not withstand any more agitation, or her life might be in danger. Prime Minister Ning, after receiving the news, could no longer sit still. He led his sons and retainers straight to the Gu residence, and forcibly brought the princess back to the Prime Minister's residence to recuperate. My daughter has been married into the Gu family for over a month, yet she has fully preserved her honor. Ethan was fundamentally incapable of fulfilling his duties as a husband. This is clear marriage fraud. I will immediately petition His Majesty for an annulment. As for the Gu family, that filthy, chaotic mess, my daughter will not dirty her hands with it. From that day, the Gu family began to decline. The branch families packed their bags and returned to their hometowns. No one from the Gu family had the face to remain in the capital. In just 1 month, the Gu family, once the subject of so much envy and gossip, quietly faded away, as if they had never existed. I took all the evidence I had gathered from the Gu family and presented it to father. He looked at the chest full of documents, which I had smuggled out hidden in my dory, and a look of deep satisfaction and affirmation crossed his face. "Elena, you have worked hard." I did not reply. Father leafed through the documents, a sharp, cruel glint in his eyes. "Elena, prepare yourself. After a while, once this storm has passed, you will become the crown princess." He did not say why he was so certain. I neither refuted nor questioned him. I simply bowed low and exited the study. I walked slowly, as if strolling through the courtyard, as if lost in thought, under the long corridor. I finally arrived at the cloud-top pavilion. Just then, I ran into my stepsister, who was walking out of her own courtyard. We met head-on. I looked at her silently. She stared back. As soon as she recognized me, her pretty face was instantly covered in dark clouds. A calamitous star who jinxes her husbands. You still want to return to the Prime Minister's residence and be the legitimate daughter. Aren't you afraid of being bad luck? My stepsister insulted me as a reflex, then turned, intending to go back for a pomelo leaf bath to wash away the filth. "Wet?" I called to her. "The calamitous star you just mentioned will soon become the crown princess." My stepsister froze, then spun around, glaring at me. "Ridiculous. With a damaged flower, like you." I nodded. "That's right. What? Has father gone mad?" My stepsister, furious, shoved me aside and ran straight for father's study. Her maid scrambled to keep up. Her greed for fortune and her desire to be the mother of the nation. I laughed. It is truly too easy to provoke the greed in these people. Far too easy. I watched my stepsister's retreating figure, then turned and went back to my own courtyard. The Ning family's drama was about to begin. The Gu family had secretly done many things for the third prince, all so discreetly that the emperor was completely unaware. Father held a thick stack of evidence showing the third prince was secretly recruiting soldiers, but he didn't submit it directly. Instead, he cleverly found a reason to help the third prince, who unintentionally expose a small opening in front of the emperor. From there, he guided the emperor to investigate the matter himself. Finding a needle in a haystack is difficult, but if you already have a clear direction, it becomes much easier. Before long, the emperor discovered the connection between the third prince and the Gu family, as well as all the secret things the third prince had done. He even found out that the third prince had intentionally ordered the bandits to kidnap me. The third prince wanted to marry me as a concubine to absorb all of the prime minister's power. But to control both me and the prime minister, he first intended to destroy my virtue. Then, after my reputation was ruined, he would step forward to graciously accept me. Even if he only offered me the position of a concubine, the entire prime minister's residence would be endlessly grateful, and I would be even more moved and absolutely loyal to him. This type of person, who steps on the pain and blood of his victims to reap benefits, is truly disgusting. The emperor, at first, didn't pay it too much mind. In his eyes, the third prince was secretly raising troops, a treasonous act, but adding one more crime like this didn't change much. Although the third prince had this intent, he was still young, and the number of troops he had recruited was not even 10,000. How could he rebel? Because of this, the emperor was still hesitating, wondering how to handle this to eliminate the threat while preserving his son. But right at that moment, a new storm erupted in the palace. The Empress Dowager suddenly fell gravely ill. The entire Imperial Medical Academy was mobilized. The treatment itself was not the issue. The problem was the Empress Dowager's medical chart. Because she was so gravely ill, the physicians conducted a full examination and recorded all her symptoms. The emperor, reading the chart, was stunned to find a note about an old, large scar on her back. The record noted it looked as if the skin had been raked by a sharp, comb-like object. The emperor stood frozen, as if struck by lightning. Two images overlapped in his mind. One was the slender figure from his childhood, who had stumbled from his father's dragon bed, clutching her disabled robes as she fled. The other figure was the person who had set fire to his mother's palace. She was also slender. The one thing linking these two shadows was that prominent, raked scar on their back. It was the same person. She had murdered his mother and almost killed him. That person had only to wash her face, to transform into the kind and gentle consort Leon, who then adopted him into her palace. She used him to rise, step by step, to the position of Empress Dowager, walking on the blood and bones of his mother. She had harmed him, yet pretended to be his great benefactor, enjoying all his gratitude and protection. How could he tolerate this? The emperor immediately commanded the physicians to use the strongest possible medicine. No matter the cost, they had to wake the Empress Dowager. He still had too many questions to ask her. No one knows what the emperor and the Empress Dowager discussed that night. They only know that when the emperor left her bedchamber, she had suddenly passed away. My father's spies in the palace reported back that there were two deep, bruised handprints on her neck. She had been strangled. The killer had acted with such storming hatred, as if they wanted to snap her neck. Afterward, the emperor executed all the servants who knew about the Empress Dowager's past, especially head matron Anne, who had always been by her side, was sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts. Father was fully aware of the storm in the palace. Afterward, he did the exact same thing I had done. He went to the third prince and said, "My beloved daughter, now annulled, bearing the reputation of a second-hand wife, her honor lost. I don't know where her future lies. I am just an old father, worried sick about this every day." The third prince had no idea the emperor was already on to him. Hearing father's words, he was secretly overjoyed. The next day, he went to the palace to ask the emperor to decree a marriage between him and me. If it were in the past, the emperor might have agreed. But today, not only did the emperor not reply, he just stared with ice-cold eyes at his son kneeling below. The third prince said he didn't mind that I was a second-hand wife. He was willing to take me as a concubine. The emperor immediately recalled what he had uncovered, the third prince's plan to destroy my reputation first, and then ask to marry me. He also thought of the Empress Dowager, who had just died. They were both the same kind of people, pushing others to a dead end, then playing the savior, offering a small favor while sucking the victim's blood and marrow. His own son was exactly like the person who had murdered his mother. Just as despicable, just as cruel. The pain in the emperor's heart was already numb. He looked at his son, who was still prattling on, and slowly closed his eyes. He had made his decision. The third prince and his entire faction were either exiled or imprisoned. The third prince himself was demoted to the rank of commoner, forever losing his chance to compete for the throne. The emperor acted swiftly and decisively, giving the third prince's faction no opportunity to react or resist. He was determined to eliminate these people who disgusted him. Not killing the third prince was the last shred of mercy he had left as a father. But beyond that, nothing. After dealing with the third prince's faction, the emperor had a change of heart and decreed another marriage for me. He wanted to compensate me, as if he wanted to compensate for his own childhood self, who had lost his mother. We were both sacrifices to the ambitions of power. The emperor betrothed me to the first prince. This was entirely within my father's expectations. He understood the emperor. After losing the third prince, he could only choose between the first and second princes. And no matter how you looked at it, the first prince, who had also lost his mother at a young age, was the choice that made the emperor feel most at ease. The first prince followed the exact script father had laid out, stepping on into that position. Half a year later, I married the first prince, becoming the first princess by right. Everyone vaguely sensed that the first prince was now the most likely candidate to be chosen as crown prince. My stepsister began visiting the first prince's residence almost daily, always intentionally choosing times when the first prince was present. I knew what she wanted, and I didn't stop her. It was just that, every time she came, I would intentionally have a plate of delicious raw, marinated seafood prepared and set on the table. Then, I would find an excuse to leave, allowing the first prince and her to be alone in the room. Time passed like this for several months. Finally, one day they collapsed. They were found naked, wrapped around each other. The imperial physician arrived to find both the first prince and my stepsister vomiting nonstop, so weak they couldn't even stand up. In the end, the physician couldn't save them. The first prince and my stepsister writhed in agony for a full day and night before they finally took their last breaths. I stood outside the door and listened as the physician announced their deaths. My heart was completely empty. E. coli, Listeria, Clostridium botulinum, Salmonella, liver flukes, tapeworms, roundworms, the various viruses, bacteria, and parasites that can exist in raw seafood. For people in ancient times, any one of these could easily be fatal. Their deaths were inevitable. All I did was wait. The first prince's sudden passing threw the emperor into a rage. After an investigation, he learned that the first prince had recently taken a great liking to raw, marinated seafood. He would often share it with my stepsister, the As. The two would eat and drink, praising it as a top-tier delicacy. They had been eating it for months without issue, but this time, they both died. Could it be poison? After a thorough investigation, no poison was found. It was simply that this time, after the marinated seafood was served, the first prince and my stepsister didn't eat it right away. They went to bed to have fun first. Several hours later, the two of them began to eat the seafood that had been left out on the table. The food had been left out too long, it had spoiled, and as a result, the two of them passed away. When they were intimate, in the runes were always posted outside. No one could get near. As for the affair between my stepsister and the first prince, I tearfully explained to the emperor that I was just a weak woman. I had no power to decide. My husband liked my stepsister. How could I object? I could only yield to my husband's wishes and help him find happiness. And because the first prince loved the marinated seafood, I had it prepared often. Who could have known the food would be served but not eaten right away? Who could have known they would be having fun together for that long? I covered my face, sobbing, playing the role of a foolish woman, blindly submissive to her husband, with no opinions of her own, too ashamed to air her family's dirty laundry. My acting was flawless, down to the bone. The emperor investigated again and again, but could not find a single piece of evidence proving I had a hand in it. Moreover, the emperor had his own spies in the first prince's residence. These spies all reported that I was completely obedient to my husband, never daring to defy him. Whatever the first prince said, I did. Whatever he wanted, I arranged. Even regarding his affair with my stepsister, I never uttered a word of protest. I even showed great concern for my stepsister, fearing she wouldn't serve him well. Hearing that I was this foolishly submissive, the emperor finally believed I was innocent. But the matter of his son, dying from eating spoiled food because he was having a secret affair, such a death was truly too shameful to spread. So, the emperor had to grit his teeth, claim the death was due to a sudden acute illness, and have the first prince buried. I, meanwhile, cried until I fainted, multiple times, and soon fell gravely ill myself, unconscious with a high fever, completely unable to return to the first prince's residence to oversee the funeral. The emperor, left with no other option, kept me in the palace, assigning me to the care of Dowager Consort Jiang for recuperation. Dowager Consort Jiang had been the one the emperor supported to counter the previous Empress Dowager. Now that the previous Empress Dowager was dead, the entire harem was almost entirely under her management. Hailing from a military family, Dowager Consort Jiang was decisive and forthright, yet incredibly meticulous. Knowing what I had been through, she was deeply sympathetic and took very good care of me. She even, fearing I would be triggered by old memories, strictly forbade any seafood from my daily meals, using only pork, chicken, and vegetables to nourish me back to health. Thanks to her, I enjoyed a peaceful and comfortable period in Dowager Consort Jiang's palace. Dowager Consort Jiang, having been unfavored during the late emperor's reign, had endured a long, dark period. Those years, plus her long struggle with the previous Empress Dowager, had made her quiet and cautious. She once said she was about to grow moss and rot. But my appearance seemed to breathe new life into her, giving her a new hope. We and Dowager Consort Jiang were a perfect match, sharing a deep empathy and understanding. We gradually became as close as a real mother and daughter. Dowager Consort Jiang treated me as her own, and I respected and loved her as my mother. We became an indispensable part of each other's lives. However, just as I was peacefully recuperating, a shocking piece of news arrived from outside the palace, making me drop the medicine bowl in my hand. My father and my stepmother had died suddenly. Dead, at the Prime Minister's residence. My face turned pale, my body swayed, and I collapsed to the ground. The last thing I saw was Dowager Consort Jiang rushing forward in panic to catch me. When I woke up, I saw Dowager Consort Jiang sitting by my bed, her expression heavy. She told me what had happened. It turned out that a merchant ship had recently transported a batch of sea snails to the capital, using a special preservation method. These snails had a very unique, wild taste. Once eaten, they were unforgettable. They quickly became a fashionable delicacy in the capital. The Prime Minister's residence, not to be left out, followed the trend and bought some. They were stir-fried with fragrant, spicy seasonings, creating a tempting dish that was served to my father. Father and stepmother both found them delicious. The flavor was rich, spicy, and sweet, the snail meat tender and juicy. The experience was wonderful. But shortly after they finished the plate, they both began to feel numbness in their lips and mouths, followed by difficulty breathing. They quickly fell into a coma. The servants, terrified, rushed to call a physician. However, by the time the physician arrived, they had both stopped breathing. After examining the food, the physician just slapped his thigh and sighed. They had eaten flower snails. Once eaten, not even an immortal could save them. Later, people from the coast explained, sea snails are delicious, but on the absolute condition that you do not accidentally eat a flower snail. This type of snail is toxic, but its appearance is almost identical to common snails. If you are not an expert, it is very difficult to tell them apart. Even experienced coastal dwellers sometimes eat one by mistake and die. One could only say that the Prime Minister and his wife were truly unlucky. After hearing Dowager Consort Jiang's explanation, a single tear rolled from the corner of my eye. My gaze was empty, without a trace of light. Dowager Consort Jiang gripped my hand tightly, her voice full of pity. "It's okay, Elena. Everything will be all right." I didn't answer. I just slowly closed my eyes. Flower snails, a neurotoxin, from the same family as the toxin in fugu. Even though I was deep in the palace, I could still exchange letters with my father. All I did was, in my letters, occasionally mention the delicious, fresh seafood that only the imperial family could enjoy, including sea snails. Then I had Sishi's brother, who lives by the sea and works as a fisherman, quietly mix a few flower snails into the batch of snails the Prime Minister's residence purchased. Even if they didn't eat the flower snails directly, just by cooking them together with the other snails, the toxin would leach into the broth. Eating any food that touched that broth, it would cause them to be poisoned and die. It was all just that simple. I was far away in the palace, powerless to intervene. On the surface, the tragedy at the Prime Minister's residence had nothing to do with me. With this, I had finally completed the original host's revenge. Every person who had harmed her, not one escaped. I completed every step of the plan flawlessly, without any cost to myself. I am truly brilliant. Although I didn't have to bear any responsibility for their deaths, I was, in the end, still a jinx, a calamitous star. Many people believed that the Gu family, the first prince, and my entire natal family Quan, had died because of me. In truth, they weren't wrong. Bearing the reputation of a calamitous star, I could not stay in the palace any longer. Before the emperor could ask me to leave, I took the initiative and petitioned him. I expressed that I was an unfortunate person and wished to renounce the secular world and become a nun, spending my days with the green lantern of the temple, chanting sutras to guide the souls of my departed family, hoping they could be reincarnated into a better life. The emperor breathed a palpable sigh of relief and immediately granted my request. Dowager consort Zhang couldn't bear to be parted from me and also requested to leave the palace with me. The emperor tried his best to dissuade her, but Dowager consort Zhang said, "I am old. I have nothing left to fear. If there is truly an ill omen, surely it holds no power at the foot of the Buddha." The emperor, unable to persuade her further, and seeing as she wasn't a critical figure, waved his hand and let her have her way. Taking Dowager consort Zhang with me, on the road to the Dawn Temple, we staged an accident. The carriage fell off a cliff, creating a scene of death beyond all recognition. We successfully fooled the imperial guards. When the guards returned to the capital to report our deaths, I, along with Dowager consort Zhang, Shi Huanzi, and a few trusted servants, were already boarding a merchant ship waiting at the coast. The ship was filled with my entire 10-mile red dari. As soon as I stepped on board, we weighed anchor and set sail for a distant kingdom overseas. With this much wealth, in those small kingdoms, I could easily become a little emperor, in my own right. The future is full of promise. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.